Hi everyone, my name is Bobby DeChellis. I'm a rigging gaffer in 728. I'm a 16-year member. My father was a rigging gaffer, so even though I've only been in the union for 16 years, I sort of grew up around it. I've been on set my whole life. And this is sort of my newest challenge. With all the LED lighting and things that have come out, the old systems, the way we used to do things, no longer really does what we need it to do. And so, like the studio business loves to do, we've taken products meant for one thing and used them for something different. And so this is how set lighting and networking can play together and hopefully make everyone's lives a lot easier. All right. So, okay, the remote's not working. It just tried you and you worked a second ago. There, oh, see, now it jumps. All right, goals for today. We want to go over a little history of set lighting. We're going to learn the basics of networking and how it relates to a modern set, and hopefully understand where we can go with this and everything that it can do. Okay, so I always start with the basics, right? What is set lighting? A lot of people ask me that. So, you know, in the most basic sense of the terms, it's the act of adding devices, typically lights, in order to get the required amount of light to the camera to expose the film adequately. Now, obviously, we go digital now, but it's the same principle. Besides being necessary to register the field of view of the camera to its recording medium, light can also influence the mood, atmosphere of the set, as well as convey emotions to the audience. Set lighting also controls eye candy lights on set that can range from a floor lamp to thousands of blinking LEDs on a futuristic battlefield. As well as lighting the set lighting technicians also distribute power to all other departments. All right, but lighting is not just lights. It's powering the lights and controlling them. From the beginning, set lighting has used everything from bubble wrap to fabrics to metal screens to control and manipulate light. Along with these tricks, a long time ago, some very clever people discovered they could control the light by manipulating the power or the voltage going to it. Lighting boards were built to control the lights by turning them on and off, and some even had the ability to dim the light by lowering the voltage. Qualified technicians that ran these were known as board ops or board operators. Ran by hand, timing was done by smaller cue lights or a yell from across the stage and eventually radios. There's a classic old lighting board there. My friend Tommy Dangsel found that for me. But what about power? So as film productions got larger, so did the lights. Huge rigs were needed to facilitate even bigger amounts of power and lights. And as power needs grew, so did crews and the necessity to standardize the way things were done. Most rigs today consist of three main parts: power, dimmers, and data. So the basics, here we go. Power and data and layers. So power, dimmer leads, and data are typically ran in layers when you're building a set. First, main power cables are the feeder circuits ran, typically 4-aught, 2-aught, or banded. Next, the dimmer leads are ran in, typically from an external dimmer hut. Dimmers can be very noisy, so they're put off stage. And dimmer cables come in Socko and Bates style. Next, the data layer is ran, typically isolated from the power, so as not to get interference. Here's some pictures. So we got power layer on the left, that's just 4-aught. And you can see we've added the Socko in the second photo. And if you look on the right, that up high, we call them chicken sticks. That is our data cables. All right, so you got some more pictures here. There's the wall cans. That's what a dimmer room typically looks like. And that was a wonderful waterfall strike. That took a long time to clean that mess up. All right, but electricity is power, but what exactly is data? As we saw earlier, lighting boards could be used to control lights. But as rigs got more complex and dimmers became the norm, something more sophisticated was needed. The old control boards were replaced by dimmer boards, and these boards were able to talk to the dimmers using a proprietary protocol called DMX. All right, so then also, important designation, if we have programmers here, that's a dimmer board. The one on the right is a console. And that's the nomenclature. A lot of programmers get upset if you still refer to it as a dimmer board. I also want to let everybody know, feel free to ask questions. This class can be a little dry. It's a lot of information, so I love feedback from you guys. Feel free to stop me. Just raise your hand. Don't worry about interrupting me. Just, go for it. So what is DMX? DMX stands for digital multiplex. It uses a digital signal. Using a digital signal, information is sent along a twisted pair from the console to the light or the dimmer rack. Although typically seen in a 5-pin configuration, only 3 of those pins actually are wired. The pin 1 is the ground or the shield, pin 2 is the negative, and pin 3 is the positive. In the same way computers talk today, the voltage difference between the cables is read, and the end device to determine the information. All right, so bits, bytes, and DMX. A bit is a single point of information. It's a 1 or a 0. A byte is 8 bits of data. So byte is bigger than a bit. I always remember because the word is longer. Each DMX cable is capable of sending 512 bits at 44 hertz, but that maxes out the cable. Due to the limitations of DMX, each 512 channels is referred to as a universe. Older consoles had multiple outputs of DMX, one for each universe. Channels 1 through 512 is universe 1, so 513 through 1024 would be universe 2, and so on, universe 3, and there's no technical limit on DMX universes. It's only limited by the console that's controlling them. All right. Important though, DMX can only be addressed from 1 to 512. I get more calls about lights not working because people put them in the 600s or 700s. All right, so DMX devices, how do we manipulate DMX? So first we have optical splitters. Essentially it splits the DMX signal and regenerates it or strengthens it. DMX can go about 1,000 feet before a repeater or optosplitter is needed. DMX can theoretically be chained through 32 devices on paper. I find less in practice, 25 is the most I've ever gotten to work, and it has to do with the transceiver chips that are within inside the light or the device. And essentially take a little bit until there's nothing left. Optis can be RDM or not. Most manufacturers have 2 styles. And DMX can also be run on almost any 3 conductors cable, including a standard CAT cable. Optosplitters often use RJ45 connectors for this reason, and that's important to make designation later on that DMX on an Ethernet cable is not the same as an Ethernet protocol. And the reason why most people do that is the economies of scale. The DMX XLR connectors can be very expensive, and RJ45s are made, you know, by the billions every day. So you can get a much cheaper device without using the standard DMX connector. All right, so RDM. What is RDM? Remote Device Management. It works on the same pins as 2 and 3 on the DMX signal. It does not work on pins 4 and 5. Those pins do nothing. They're just for show. Normal DMX data goes one way, from the console to the lights. RDM lets the lights talk back to the console. It allows you to do a lot of advanced stuff. You can readdress the light that's already hanging. You can change the personality or profile of a device. And some devices can even get updated through RDM. All devices in line, though, have to support RDM, including if you have optosplitters. It can be buggy. I've had a lot of trouble with it. I don't know if that's your guys' experience, but typically we use it and then turn it off. There's also RDM remotes that are other devices than a console that can send and use RDM, DMX cats, and Swissons. All right, so the limitations of DMX. In the days of old, 1 tungsten light on 1 dimmer would use 1 channel. 1 practical light on 1 dimmer lead would use 1 channel. Now in this way, it wasn't a big problem for DMX. With 3 universes, you could have 1,500 lights. But then came multiple channel lights. Tungsten heads with multiple globes or bulbs in them, and fluorescents with individual control of each globe emerge. Lights began to become multi-channel, and DMX universes filled up very quickly. Here we have an old rig, this is from Ocean's 13. But the space lights here use all 6 channels in 1 SOCO, and the Maxi Brutes actually had 12 channels each. So I believe this stage had 2 universes, which was a lot back then. And also, dimmers and tungsten use a lot of power. So the dimmer hut outside that stage, rivers of 4-aught. I think we all know that. Over 60 pieces of 4-aught fed this hut. And this one, yeah, it had 3 dimmer huts on the outside. It was a lot of power, a lot of cable. But the dimmer hut's no longer the norm. Because of digital photography, LEDs, and a company called Ratpac, we don't see dimmer huts very often. Older tungsten lights need lots of power and produce lots of heat in order to expose the film. With the advent of digital photography, much less light is needed. LEDs emerged and began to allow gaffers to change the color of light and its intensity without dimmers or gel. LED lights also produce the soft lighting texture that lots of DPs desire. While tungsten lights are still found throughout sets, they are typically used as very large sources like sunlight or very small ones as table lamps. All right, so moving lights, LEDs, and pixels. Alongside LEDs, other sophisticated lights began to require more and more DMX channels. Moving lights or moving heads can require huge amounts of channels to control their motor and light functions. Some lights even allow for individual control of each LED, typically refer to those as pixels. Each pixel can be anywhere from 3 to 6 channels itself, and there are lights with hundreds of pixels. universes fill up fast, and and make rigging very complicated. All right, so there's got to be a better way, right, than running 20 different separate DMX cables. A lot to manage. All right, typical shows today have about 10 universes per stage. That was unheard of 10 years ago, at least where I worked. But some enter ArtNet and streaming ACN. ArtNet and streaming ACN use Ethernet cables. ArtNet and streaming and ACN are referred to as DMX over Ethernet protocols. An Ethernet protocol is an umbrella term to describe the type of information or language that is being sent over an Ethernet line. Many protocols and language can coexist on the same cable. All right, so let's wait a minute. Hold on, what is all this stuff? When DMX and lighting boards were in their infancy, another product we all use today was being developed. Internetworks, or the internet. I think everyone's familiar with the internet, of course. The goal of the internet was to allow multiple devices to communicate with each other in all kinds of different ways. Using bytes and bits, protocols developed that allowed one device to talk to any other device. This is an ongoing process, and will keep going on forever. There's new ones being created as we speak. All right, so here we go. Internet, Ethernet, the internet, protocols, and lighting. This is where it gets exciting. But before we get into a lighting network, we're going to take a look at how a regular network works, or any network, because they all run on the same foundation. All right, there are two models that typically used to describe how a network works. There's an OSI model, or the Open Systems Integration model. It's known as the 7-layer model. And the TCP/IP model, or Transmission Control Protocol / Internet Protocol, also known as the 4-layer model. All right, it's important to note that these two models are describing the same thing, they're just doing it a little bit differently. And so they mean the same thing. They're not different from each other. It's just sort of, you'll see coming up how they differentiate. So we'll start with the OSI model. It's an Open Systems Integration model. It's got 7 layers. All right, so these layers become very important later on to describe how IT products work in an integrated system. All right, your first layer, that's your physical structure, delivery type, cable, hubs, wireless. How is the information moving? Layer 2, it's called the data link layer. That's the switches, the Ethernet, it's the basic movement of the signal. Then we have layer 3. We have network level 3 switches, routers, advanced routing of the signal. Layer 4 is transport. Exactly how is that digital signal moving on those devices? It handles errors and transports the information. Layer 5 is the session, or the inter-host communication. Devices can talk back and forth or only send and receive. And then we have layer 6 is the presentation. It formats the data, allows the user to view the data, as you're seeing now. And then 7 is the application, the user integration. Allows the user to perform a task related to the connection and the information as I'm clicking through my model. So here's a little picture coming up. This will make it a little easier. So here's it laid out for you. Very exciting, I know. So the key terms here is there's 2 different ways of communication. There's the TCP, which is a transmission control protocol, and there's 2-way communication there. It establishes a connection, sometimes called a handshake, and then sends data back and forth. Very reliable. And then UDP, user datagram protocol, is a 1-way communication. Data is simply sent down the pipeline. There's no need to confirm. It's much faster, but you're not sure it all got there. So depending on what you're doing, there are different needs. All right, so now let's look at the TCP/IP model. All right, it's a simplified version of the OSI model, essentially. It's only got 4 layers, and essentially all it does is combine different parts of the OSI model to simplify it. All right, there it goes. All right, layer 1, OSI, it essentially combines layers 1 and 2 of the OSI, and they call it the data link layer. Layer 3, or layer 2 of the TCP model is the 3rd layer of the OSI model. It's a network or internet layer. Okay, there. Layer 3. Layer 3 is the layer 4 from the OSI model, which is the transport layer. This thing is, see? Sorry. All right. This is the most exciting part. Oh. All right, layer 4, the OSI model combines layers 5, 6, and 7. All the user layers are combined into one application layer. So here we got a little diagram here. That'll help. So you can see there, it's just essentially combining those things. A little easier to talk about. Both models describe how a network works. However, when you are talking about a network, typically the OSI model is used. Things are rated, how they control a network, by what layer they function on. And that becomes really important later on when you're choosing the products for your set. Choosing something that, and as the layers go up, they tend to get more complicated. So that's the other thing. So yes, they have more functionality, but you got to be careful because it can be a lot to digest. I don't know if anybody here's ever opened a fully managed layer 4 switches menu. It's people go to school for years to learn how to run those. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Is it easier to troubleshoot with less layers as well?
I'm sorry?
Is it easier to troubleshoot with less layers?
Yes, 100%. Yes. So we'll go over that in a little bit as we get to the, and I do this part. There's sort of no way to get through this part of it. But yeah, as we go on layer, you'll find out that the lower layer stuff is much simpler, and I call it plug and play. There's much less setup, and for most shows that I run into contact with, that's all they need to use. Only when you're even I've pushed 100+ universes in a layer 1 totally unmanaged system, no problems. And we'll talk about a little later about exactly what kind of problems you could run into, or the reasons when it is to step up into the next layers. All right. Oh, yes, sir.
The OSI model, it had layer 1, it had hubs, and layer 2 had switches. What's a hub?
Hubs aren't really used anymore. I'll be honest with you, I kind of just neglected even mentioning them. It's sort of they always talk about it in when you talk about networking, but they're sort of the original switch. And I'm not too familiar exactly how they work, but they're not used anymore. I mean, I've never ran into a hub in my life. But it's a term. A lot of times when you talk to an IT guy, they still might mention it. But yeah, hubs are a thing of the past. All right, so let's start getting through some of these network terms. There's a lot of them. All right, so LAN, local area network, and that's typically that's what you're going to have on your set. You're going to have your own little network that is in a limited area. It's like a company network within a building. Now there's a. Come on. Oh, see, that catches up. All right. Wide area network is a WAN. It's a network that extends over a large geographical area, like the internet. Packet, that's a formatted unit of network data. That's how data is being sent over the networks is divided into small boxes or packets. So that is what you're sending and receiving from your source. Packets are very important. A frame is a container for the packet, and network interface is any kind of software to networking hardware, usually referred to as a NIC card. So any of your Ethernet devices have a NIC card in it, and that's how they get on the network. Oftentimes computers can have multiple interfaces, and each one will have its own IP. The last is the port and port number. It's not necessarily what people think it is. I assumed a port number was like, hey, what number is that on that switch, or what hole is that? But port number is an identifier tool, and certain protocols have different port numbers, and that's sort of how they're identified by the end devices. All right. Let's see, structure of a packet. I mean, you can check out the structure of a packet. It's a little over our heads for this class, but essentially there's a whole lot of information going in there, and we'll talk about it a little more later exactly what's happening in the network and how this packet's built. All right. Oh, there we go. Yeah, different protocols have different port numbers. I don't know if you've ever heard of port filtering, but essentially you can tell a switch, hey, ignore this port if you have multiple types of protocols on your network and you don't want that protocol to go through that switch. So it's an advanced feature. Not a lot of people use it, but it is something that does come up, especially with the MA system. All right, so network terms and basics. We got speed. All right, networks can support a variety of speeds based on different needs and costs. Older networks worked on 10 base T. That was 10 megabits per second. Next came 100 base T, 100 megabits per second. They call that fast Ethernet. So you're going to start seeing some of these key words, and it's important to remember these because when you're shopping for network devices, you're going to see things like fast Ethernet. And what that's telling you is that it's actually a little slower than what people expect most days. Today, the standard is gigabit. And that's what you're going to want to use in the majority of your lighting network. It's 1,000 base T and it's 1 billion bits per second. This remote is, all right. Faster speeds are available, they do exist, but you know, they're a lot more expensive and they're really not necessary for what we do. Lighting is not sending a ton of information, but we want to send it quickly because we need it to get there, obviously, for the shot. All right, so speed is the transfer rate from one source to the other. I always think about it like the volts. And the bandwidth is the amount of packets that can be sent per second. It's the amps. It's how much information is chugging along that line. Speed is related to bandwidth, but bandwidth is not necessarily related to speed. It's not super important to know this, but conceptually it's good to keep that in mind. Although larger bandwidths typically mean faster speeds, are available. Okay, speed is a proportion of the amount of packets being sent versus the bandwidth, and using larger bandwidths than needed does give us a safety net, as timing is critical in lighting networks. And that's often what you're going to find with your lighting products. You will overspec what you need in the same way that we overspec cable. You know, if you want 200 amps of power, you're not going to run 2-aught, you're probably going to run 4-aught because you want to leave yourself some headroom. And that's the same, you do the same thing with networking. By overspeccing or getting slightly faster or bigger than you need, you're going to find that you just have better reliability. Okay. I don't know what is going on with this thing. All right. Speed versus, this is a little drawing to give you an idea of what it is. You know, the connection's like a water pipe. The pipe is the bandwidth. The larger the pipe, the more data. But the speed is like the actual water. So you can have fast speed in small pipes, but it's a little easier if you got bigger pipes. Larger bandwidths can facilitate faster speeds, but the slowest piece on the network will determine the overall speed of the network. So if you have, you know, 100 gigabit switches, but in the middle of it you have a fast Ethernet switch, well then you got a fast Ethernet network. So it's important to make sure that all your devices that on your network are the speeds that you want them to be. Now it's less important in the line devices because they're just receiving. So, but the actual distribution of the data, you want to make sure that they're all spec the same. All right. So important note here, some latency is expected and present in all networks. You just can't avoid it. But it can render a lighting network useless. Oftentimes lighters are synced to an actor movement, a set detail, or circumstance of a scene. If all lights do not respond quickly at the same time, the cue is useless and there's no prizes for close enough. Timing is the most important thing in lighting networks. I think we all know that. You know, you have to, when the actor hits the mark, when the door opens, when they hit the switch, it has to happen when you need it to happen. All right, so network cables, right? How is that information moving, right? What are our options here? All right, so Ethernet, it's the cable standard for networks. It has 4 twisted pairs, but it can come in many different categories. That's why they're referred to as CATs. Category 5, Category 6, Category 7. All right, each category is a different speed it's capable of and distances it can go before a repeater is needed. So that's important to remember because different CAT cables can actually go farther with less switches. Sorry, do you have a question? Oh, sorry. Thanks. Feel free to ask questions, everybody. I know it's some late arrivals. Stop me, ask questions. This is sort of the driest part of the presentation, but you know, don't hesitate. All right. So Cat5e is the current standard on set. That's what we use mostly. It allows gigabit speeds up to 100 meters, which is 328 feet. So typically we don't go more than 300 feet before you want to put a switch in. Obviously you don't want to max anything out. All right, and there's 2 different types of cable. You have unshielded twisted pairs, or UTP, and then you have shielded twisted pairs, STP. Now, depending on how your cables have to be ran or where they're ran, the twisted pairs essentially take out most of the interference if it's there. But if you know you have to run your cable alongside a big dimmer rig or a big power rig, it would be a smart move to get a shielded twisted pair. But oftentimes, as we saw earlier with the layers, we isolate the Cat6 from the power completely. All right. And then there's a lot of words that sound very similar in networking. We learned about UDP earlier, not to be confused with UTP. So there are lots of acronyms that are like one letter off and they mean completely different things. So it can be a little daunting to remember it all, but you know, it all comes in. But they're easily mixed up. And you're gonna see a little infographic here. You know, we got different speeds. You can see Cat 5 can do 1,000 megabits, but you can't go as far. So that's why Cat 5e is kind of the standard. I see a lot of Cat 5 and 6 on set mostly. And then 6 and 7 are becoming more common, but they're really not, we're not pushing that kind of bandwidth. Now, if you're doing video feeds on your set or big pixel map rigs, you might want to consider it, but I'm working right now on getting some analytics about how much data is really going through our pipeline, and it's minimal compared to, you know, say a 4K video feed from camera or people like that. So lots of different choices, but that is just like 4-out, it's the lifeblood of your rig. So, oh, go ahead.
Okay, what's the difference between UDP and UDP?
Yeah, so for these two,
Yeah.
so the UDP is user datagram protocol, and that was that other system we had earlier. Sorry, let me go back. Where is that? Where was that slide? User datagram protocol. Sorry, I can't remember it all. I have to always look it up.
Sorry, I got it.
Okay, but yeah, just important to realize they're not the same thing.
You mentioned interference, so what kind of like actual real world like problems you encounter if you got interference over one of your Ethernet lines? Would your fixture not be hitting the correct settings, or would it just not be responding, or?
Yeah, exactly what you said. So it causes a whole host of issues. So you know, AC power causes inductance. You have collapsing and expanding magnetic fields at all times. And it's the twisted pairs. The idea of the twisted pair is that whatever interference they're receiving is that they're receiving it mutually. You know, they're both receiving that same interference. And as long as they have the same interference, at the end, if they're reading the difference between them, it won't matter. So that's why we twist the pairs. But as far as what would happen if you did have a lot of interference on your cable that was affecting it, it's, you know, there's a whole host of things that could happen. You could have lost packets, lights not come on, packets being rejected, and it all depends on what type of network you have. Whether you're unmanaged, managed, because some switches would just drop that information because it's essentially gone bad. You know, it doesn't have the appropriate header and footnote for it to accept it. So unfortunately, there's not an easy answer to know. But yeah, you know, if you see this problem, it means this is probably happening. And yeah.
So you mentioned that some of the lights could then send data back. Is that something that you think light manufacturers might eventually build into the error codes and stuff like that to kind of give you real world feedback for your exact setup?
Yeah, so there are a lot of lighting action manufacturers that use RDM. I know Aries Sky Panels do, the Vortexes do. So yeah, and actually Clay Packey was the last big holdout, as far as I knew, for the big lighting manufacturers, and they have integrated RDM in their fixtures as well. Yeah. No, RDM is great, but RDM, oh, yes?
And I'm sorry, in lighting, our packet center, is it UDP or TCP?
So those two models that we looked at earlier are the same. You know, they're just describing what's happening. So we're going to get to the packets in a little bit, but yeah, if that makes sense. All right. Don't worry. I am not an IT guy. I'm a rigging gaffer that uses networking. So yeah, you know, but it's important to note RDM is a DMX protocol. It's not an Ethernet protocol. So that works on the DMX line. But here, we'll get to the packets.
So,
Yep, go ahead. No, it's great.
if you're using shielded cables, you don't want the shield connected to the equipment on both ends because then you create ground loops, right?
In theory, but I mean DMX is shielded, you know, and that's the way it works. I mean, you're essentially, you know, you're disrupting that potential by keeping it all even. You know, yes, you could create a ground loop, and there have been rigs where I've been in old buildings and I've had to use ground lifters, and I'm not proud of it. It can pose problems. I stay away from shielded, but there are times where it is necessary.
Yeah, because we never use shielded.
Yeah.
You have to have special connectors. The equipment has to have metal, you know, so it'll take a metal RJ45 for your ground connection. It's like, I feel like people kind of hype shielded Ethernet, but it's never practical.
I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of times we all want the biggest, best, and brightest, and oftentimes, you know, especially for networking, we don't need those devices. These are meant for far bigger applications than what we're doing. And I know we all like to think that, you know, our stuff's the biggest and baddest, but I mean, we're small potatoes. We actually called Netgear one time and tried to get them to make a lighting switch for us, and they said, you got to order 1 million of them before they even talk to you. So, You can always tell a shielded cable, like the gentleman said, because there's a metal connector on the ends. You'll see, besides the twisted pairs, they usually have metal sides, or you'll see metal there, and that's kind of the giveaway that you're looking at a shielded cable. Because it's all written on there, but as you know with 4-aught and other things, it can wear off over time. All right, so we looked at the cables. All right, so network cables, a little continued. So termination, right? How does it connect to something? The RJ45 is a standard termination for Ethernet cable. It's the registered jack 45. There are 2 different wiring standards. They all have really fun names. T568B and T568A. All right. The B is the most common. A is less common. However, as long as both ends are wired the same, you can really do whatever you want. And if you are going to make your own cables, I typically use pass-through cables. I don't know if you're familiar with pass-through jacks, but if you ever try to wire an Ethernet cable, it's extremely frustrating. The wires are very small, and what happens with a lot of people if they make their own, they untwist the pairs and they put the jack on, but they've untwisted more of the pairs than they need to. And so essentially you're inviting interference at the end of your connection. And that's why the pass-throughs, essentially, the cables go through and you can pull them all the way down. So I have a picture of one here, but they're great. If you're ever making your own cables, I highly recommend pass-throughs. And they make crimpers that'll cut and crimp at the same time. All right, so normal cat cable versus Ethercon. All right, so normal cats are designed to be plugged. Okay, actually, I'm supposed to delete that because I'm getting conflicting information about that. So ignore the only 7 times. But the point being is that most Ethernet cables are not made to be plugged and unplugged. You know, when you think about IT closets and things like that, typically these things are set up and they run for years and years and years. Obviously, there's cross-patching and things like that, but they're not made to be unplugged and plugged repeatedly. I treat it as an expendable. If I use regular cat cable, we order it off Amazon, it's usually trash at the end of a season. Ethercon, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it has a protective shell around it. It's super high quality, and it works really well. You get that DMX click. It's essentially like the DMX shell over the Ethernet cable. Works great for outdoors. You don't have to worry about kickouts. Unfortunately, all the switches that take it are extremely expensive. But, that's what it takes. All right, so let's keep going in network devices because there's a lot. All right, so routers and WAPs. A router is a device that can forward or receive data packets from one network to another. It can also route the information within the network. A WAP or an AP or just an app is a wireless or just a regular access point. I mean, technically a switch is an access point. Essentially any way you can get into your network. So it allows devices to log into a network through a hard line or wirelessly as a WAP. A bridge is, once again, this is another sort of older device. They still exist, but used to connect 2 or more networks. Oh no, sorry, there's 2 kinds of bridges. This bridge is still new. So it's used to connect 2 or more networks, and they're often wireless. I don't know if anybody ever plays with Ubiquity stuff or that, but they have lots of wireless bridges. Yeah, good stuff. I've used them with great pleasure. They're fantastic. But it's point-to-point transmission. It's important to remember. So bridges is from A to B, and that's it. I mean, they do have bridges that can have multi-point, but it's not something that you're going to be logging into with your phone or getting internet from it. A gateway is like a router on steroids. It routes the signal, but can also translate different protocols. It's like a multilingual translator, and it can help different networks that are speaking different languages talk to each other. All right, so the switch, the backbone of the lighting network, probably the most important part of it. All right, so switch is essentially an Ethernet splitter. It can split an Ethernet signal. It can be smart or dumb, managed or unmanaged. Switches are typically categorized by the highest level of the OSI model that they operate within. So a layer 1 switch is unmanaged. It's plug and play, there's no setup. You plug it in, it receives data, it sends it out the other ports. Easy peasy. Layer 2 is semi-managed, smart switches. Now, once you get into layer 2, you're going to need to give an IP address. I find smart switches to be sort of the worst of both worlds. They don't really do anything more than unmanaged switch, and they give you a lot of problems. So I try to, looking for those keywords when you're ordering products, I try to stay away from anything that says smart. Now there are some uses for them, but that's something, they're niche, and they may work for your network, but I try to avoid them. All right, so you have layer 3, managed switches, network routing capabilities. So these are the switches that when you do want to make the jump from unmanaged to managed network, these are the switches you'll need to be implementing in your network. And they have lots of different features. And then there's layer 4, which is a fully managed switch. It can do complicated session routing capabilities. I've never needed a layer 4 switch on my network. I don't know of anyone that uses them, but you never know. These are fully managed, like Cisco switches. People spend a long time learning how to operate these properly. Okay, so here's some network. Here's pictures. We got a switch. You see it says there, fast Ethernet. Keywords to look for. You know it's not gigabit. Routers, WAPs. I'm sure we're all familiar with WAPs. Everyone at our house, you know. All right. So setting up a network. The IP address. The IP address is the Internet Protocol address. It's like the DMX address. It's used to a uniquely identify a device in your network. No duplicates on the same network. You can cause a lot of problems if you do that. All right, so most devices on a network require a subnet mask and an IP address, but remember, unmanaged switches don't need either. Clients and hosts also need IPs along with the network infrastructure devices. So the devices that are doing the communicating and the devices that are sending the information all need to have IP addresses. An IP address consists of 4 groups of 3 numbers. It's referred to as an octet, though, even though it's 3 numbers, because each group of 3 numbers is represented by 8 digits of binary. The available numbers in each octet are 0 through 255. However, 0 and 255 are reserved for subnet masks. So an IP address can be 1 through 254 in each octet. All right, so here's an example of an IPv4 address. You know, 192.168.1, very popular in lighting networks. Any 192.168s in the room? Yeah, it's my favorite. All right, leading zeros are left off when you do an IP address. So just keep that in mind. 192.168.001 is not the same as the one on the right. So just for our purposes and what we do, we want to leave off those leading zeros. I knew it was boring. All right, so IP addresses continued. All right, so IPv4, they got 4 octets of information, hence the name, IPv4. IP addresses can be static or dynamic. So static IPs are configured manually. You go into the device, you open up the settings, you go in there, you set the IP address, easy peasy. But you can also have dynamic IPs, and they can be configured by a device called a DHCP server. It stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. And this is how your computer, your phone, most things, pretty much everything connects to the internet. A client is assigned a lease on an IP address, and when they log off, the IP address goes back into a pool. So every DHCP server has a pool of addresses that it's allowed to use, and it just, as people log on and off, it dishes those out. There are also IPv6 addresses, and they have 16 octets of information. It was needed because basically the world's out of IP addresses. There's just not enough for everybody, for all the devices. It's not currently used in lighting that I'm aware of. I don't know of any lighting products that use it, but you know, I'm constantly surprised at what I don't know. So if anybody knows of one, feel free to raise your hand. It uses hexadecimal coding, which is a lot of fun if anyone's familiar with ArtNet. We will go over this a little bit when we do talk about ArtNet. All right, so IP addresses, more IP fun. Most IP addresses ranges are reserved, and only a few private IP ranges exist. The public IP ranges are those addresses that are reserved for the internet. So there are only certain addresses that are allowed on the internet. Much the same way that the wireless spectrum has been divvied up by the FCC, so have the IP addresses. And so you can only actually log, if you manually set your IP address to something, you may not actually get, your device may not connect to the internet and won't be allowed to. Only certain static IPs are allowed. Duplicate IP addresses cannot coexist on the same network. The open ranges are, the ones that are not allowed on the internet, are 10.172.16 through 172.31, are 192.168, and all right, anyway. Along with their IP address, devices also have a MAC address, but that is assigned to them, what we call it birth, when the device is created. And in the same way that the IPs have been partitioned off, so are MAC addresses. So if you have a really smart switch or a smart network, you can actually look up a MAC address and it'll tell you what company made that product. And that can be very beneficial. If you see something on your network that, hey, I don't recognize that, or I don't know what that is, you can look up a MAC address and, oh, that was made by Swisscom. Okay, that's one of the nodes. So MAC addresses are very important. It can be called the burned-in address or the physical address. MAC stands for the Media Access Control, and that's kind of what they look like. They also use hexadecimal. We'll go over that in a little bit, but it's letters and numbers. Yeah, very fun. All right. All MAC addresses are completely unique. There are no duplicate MAC addresses. They're like a social security number. They're given to the product when it's born, and that's its thing.
You can spoof the MAC address though, like your router.
Yeah, you can do that. You can run their program. I do try to keep it a little, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, you shouldn't. But yes, you can. Yes, there are. Now these are the basic rules. But as you get the more advanced stuff, you can basically do anything you want with networking, and that's why it's so cool. All right. So along with our IPs, we always have our subnets, right? So a subnet works in conjunction with an IP address to help organize your network. A subnet is a subdivision of a network. I like to think of the subnet as the zip code, right? So your IP is your street address, your subnet's your zip code, and the packet's the mail that's going there. The router is the sorting station, and the switch is the mail carrier. Subnets will almost always use a 0 or 255 in each octet. 255 essentially locks the IP range where 0 leaves it open, and we'll keep expanding on this. So I have a host IP, I have 192.168.0.102 with a subnet of 255.255.255.0. All right, so all devices in this range will talk to our host because these 3 octets are locking this part of the IP address. So it's saying, okay, this needs to match. Only this last octet can be different. But if we open the subnet, we can allow for more devices. I don't have a reason to keep our subnet small in lighting. I keep it at 255.255, and we'll see how many devices that allows you to have. But you can see each octet opens up a multiple of another 254 devices. And it's not an addition, it's a multiple. So you can see I got the numbers coming up here. A Class A subnet mask is just 255 in the first octet. Class B is 255 in the first 2 octets, and Class C is 255 in 3 octets. So for Class A subnet, you can have over 16 million devices on your network. That's a lot. Class B, 64,000, and Class C is 254. So Class C in binary, if you see what it looks like, you can see when we're locking it, it's all ones. So that's what 255 looks like in binary. So you're seeing it there. It's all ones. It's matching it there. So there are variable length subnet masks, not 255 value, and it's something called CIDR notation, and that's called classless interdomain routing. And I have seen some lighting devices that utilize this. It's not super common, but it's typically written like this, where they write this /24 in the back. And essentially that number correlates to how many ones there are. So if you're using like a partial net, like 24 is what this is. This is 24 ones. It's 3 full octets of 1. But you can use these partial nets, and you can make it /23, and you'll be losing that 1. And so that allows for partial nets. It's not something I ever do in practice or anything I've ever needed on my lighting network, but it's important to know when you see it. If you see that slash, that's CIDR notation. And you can only change from 1 to 0 once. So you can't have a CIDR notation with like 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, and then go back again. Once it goes to 0, that's it. You can't go back to 1. That's important to remember. All right, but subnets by themselves do not stop devices from talking to each other. There's advanced routing features that you need to use in order to be utilized properly. All right, so there's types of data transmission. How is the data being sent from the client to the devices? So unicast is one host sends data to one client. Very simple, efficient if you're only talking back and forth. And it loses efficiency though when you have many clients and they all need the same data. It's a lot of work because each time it's sent, it's done individually. So if you have a lot of devices, it can fill up your bandwidth very quickly. Broadcast, one host sends data to every client on the network. So everybody gets everything. Requires the end device to filter out the data it doesn't need though. And this can be a problem. So It breaks down when the client can't handle all that data. So if you have some of the lower, not even the lower end devices, even some of the nicer devices that we use for lighting that are Ethernet capable, they break down around 38, 40 universes. Now I've hit nodes though with hundreds of universes and they seem to handle it. So it's important to sort of know where your limitations are. But broadcast is what you're seeing in an unmanaged network. All right. Multicast, and that's one host sending data to groups of clients. And this is going to be our friend here. Multicast is the system we really like. All right, only clients that request the data are sent the data. So I only send stuff to people, to the nodes or the lights that actually need the data. I'm not flooding the whole network with every single packet in every single universe to every single device. All right, it operates on layer 3 of the OSI model. All right, and requires special protocols to function. All right, so here's a little infographic. So you got your unicast, one-to-one, multicast, one-to-many, and broadcast, one-to-all. All right, so multicast and IGMP snooping. So in order for multicast to work, you have to have IGMP snooping. If you don't, you just have broadcast. They work hand in hand with each other. And essentially what multicast does with IGMP snooping, it creates groups of clients and sends the packets to only the clients that need them. Multicast routing happens on layer 3 by a process called IGMP snooping or intergroup management protocol. Now layer 2 switches do have the capability of doing snooping. However, you'll need at least one layer 3 switch to make the system work. And we'll explain that in 1 minute. All right, oh, there he goes. Requires one switch to be the querier, and all the other switches have to have snooping enabled. So the querier will send out a poll every so often, and sometimes you can adjust that, sometimes not, depending on who's making the switch. The querier sends out polls and goes, hey, who wants to hear what? And the switches create a database within themselves, and they use the MAC addresses, and they create routing tables. And you can actually log into the switch a lot of times and see these routing tables. But that's how the switches are the ones that are distributing the packets to the devices that need them. And the querier speed can be adjusted to make it work more dynamic. I don't know about the default time. Ignore that. I'm constantly getting new information from different manufacturers about how things work. So that's why I always tell somebody, if you know I've got something incorrect here, please correct me. I do my best to update this as often as I can. But yeah. Anyway. Multicast without IGMP is just broadcasting. And that's why sometimes people will tell you, oh yeah, it doesn't matter what IP address I put on my node, it works on my network. And that's because you're broadcasting. But if you want to use multicast properly, you have to follow the network rules. One of the greatest gaffers that I work for, when he runs an unmanaged network, he doesn't care about IP addresses, because it doesn't matter. But once he steps up to his larger rigs, you have to be more disciplined and make sure those IP tables are complete and you know where you're sending what. All right, and note, IGMP is not ICMP. It's another word that sounds very similar, but it's not the same thing. Okay, so all right, IGMP, here we go. So you got the querier, but you got the switch won't snoop, so it doesn't do anything. Without a snooping switch, the querier doesn't work. But here we go, we have a snooping switch, and all of a sudden, oh, only these two computers want the information, they're the two getting it. So I inherited a network years ago on a show, and they had put all layer 2 switches in with IGMP enabled, but they didn't put a querier on the network. So essentially the tables were never getting updated. And what happened is it would all work fine, except the programmer would move the board from here to there, and it would take him 30 minutes to reconnect sometimes. And it's because the tables have a default reset of a certain time. I can't confirm all this. This was a lot of calls to tech support. So, but the most important part of IGMP is the querier. Now, the cool part is a lot of lighting network switches like Luminex and MA, they will allow you to have multiple queriers active. And essentially they talk to each other, and usually the switch with the lowest IP number will take over as the querier. And the coolest part about that is if you have a big network and you lose your querier, it'll shut down your whole network, right? So it's nice that you can, on these lighting switches, you can have multiple queriers. So if something does happen, say someone steps on a cable or something's disconnected, it's robust and it'll survive. So, and that's why I think it's really important to use switches specifically. Oh, go ahead.
So, but Only if the switches are interconnected.
Yeah, yeah.
Each switch to the switch. Right?
Yeah, you gotta have a physical connection between each switch. Yes. But yes, that's why lots of people will use off-the-shelf gear. I see it all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're comfortable with logging into a layer 3 switch and using those options, more power to you. It can be daunting. There are tabs and things and all sorts of protocols that I've never heard of, and no matter how much I try to learn it, it is it's tough. So I prefer. The lighting switches are more expensive. We're a niche market. We're small potatoes. Netgear doesn't want to talk to us, but you get what you pay for. And I just did my whole show with Luminex, and it was fantastic. They worked right out of the box, super easy, plug and play. I mean, just fantastic switches. And so, especially if you're jumping into the 4-way of networking, I highly recommend using a switch that's designed for lighting. It'll make your life 10 times easier. And then, as you get more comfortable with it, move up, try something new. One of the best people I ever talked to was a programmer. His name's Dave Kane, and he taught a class about networking. It's how I learned. And he told me, he goes, you have to take a risk. There's never going to be an idealized situation where you can just sit there and try out networks. So every season on my show, I basically try something a little more advanced with our network. And you try it in a small area, and you expand it, and you expand it, and you expand it, and if it works, hey, you keep doing it. But we are such a little market in the big world. I mean, networking devices are sold by the billions. I bet how many lighting switches were sold last year? It's probably not 0.1% compared to everybody else. So a lot of this stuff we have to sort of figure out on our own. And you're going to run into weird problems and things that aren't necessarily expected, but it's the pool of user information is the greatest resource. We have Facebook groups back home. We all talk to each other, but it's a constant struggle to figure out how we can implement this stuff with our lights. And being that the light manufacturers are smaller too, sometimes they're not always implementing the protocols correctly. And so it can be a challenge. It really can. But there's really no other way to learn it or do it than just to try it. That's why I highly recommend it. You got to take the plunge. Oh, go ahead.
I'm not familiar with these switches, but are they command line or GUI or both? How does that work?
So unmanaged switch won't have a GUI. It won't have anything. There's nothing to log into. There's nothing there. When you move up to layer 2 and above, that's when you're able to log into a switch, because that'll have an IP address. So those switches will usually have a default IP on their label. And basically you go to your internet browser, you plug in the switch, you type in that IP, and the switches menu will come up. Now some companies like Netgear or Cisco, they have programs you can download, and they will locate all their devices on your network, and you can manage them from there.
Okay, so these switches are just layer 2, they're not layer 3?
Some are. It all depends. There's so many different types.
Okay.
But most lighting switches that I've used are all layer 3. Layer 2 kind of gets skipped over. As they're able to do querying, they're all layer 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the router.
What's that?
The router?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so VLANs stands for Virtual Local Area Network. It allows multiple networks to run on a single cable or a trunk, and this is where it gets kind of confusing. Different companies refer to the same thing happening with different buzzwords or keywords. So it can be a little confusing. One company might call multiple VLANs a trunk, and 2 cables doing the same thing as a trunk. And so it's important to just sort of don't gloss over those buzzwords too quickly, because you have to know the company that you're using. So it's a little daunting and annoying, but it's like basically how the color phases are different on every distro. Can't quite get a standard there. The networks are completely isolated from each other using advanced routing on layer 3. VLAN designations are typically referred to as a tag or a tagged port. Crosstalk can be permitted across VLANs if that's what you want. And it's a way to divide the network without IGMP and multicast. However, you can still use IGMP and multicast on separate VLANs. All right, It's more of a nuts and bolts division. It's a little less dynamic, more static, and that's why some people like it a lot. Device 1 is on VLAN A until the user changes it, not the routing system. It can help limit the amount of devices talking and listening on your network. As your network gets bigger and you get more devices and more information is being sent, you can overwhelm things. So that's why it can be important to separate things when necessary or when you can. Or for instance, if you want to give another department some bandwidth. If you have an advanced layer 3 network and sound goes, oh crud, I got to go put transmitters everywhere. Can you help me run some RJ45? You can say, hold on. You can give them their own separate VLAN on your switch, and then their sound stuff will not talk to your lighting stuff, and you don't have to worry about any interference. So it can be a really cool way, to hook up other departments on set. And in fact, it's sort of a long-term goal of mine. We put in the power infrastructure for lights, so we start putting in data infrastructure, and then we can hand off to people. Camera needs a 4K video feed from this stage to that stage. Don't worry, we got it. We'll give you a VLAN here, VLAN there, and we don't have to worry about our networks being affected by whatever they're doing. So VLANs are really cool. All right, they can use the isolate traffic while minimizing cable, and then trunk is the name given to the port managing multiple VLANs, but as you'll see on the next slide, and some companies refer to trunk as something else. So you can see there, even though there's only one cable between these switches, these computers don't see each other because they're on different VLANs. VLAN 1 doesn't see VLAN 2 unless I want it to, and none of them see each other. And so it's essentially 3 different cables with 3 different switches, but I only had to run one cable with one switch. So it can be a really efficient way to partition out your network. All right, link aggregation.
One thing,
oh yeah, go ahead.
For that to work, everything has to be managed, right? Everything has
Yes.
to be layer 3.
So you can, it's not, people always, the IT guys always cringe when I do it, but you can mix managed and unmanaged. And I don't have a graphic for it. I wish I could draw it out. But basically, if I've got a managed port, and then I can put an unmanaged switch after it. And that unmanaged switch will just whatever that port's spitting out is what it'll give it. And so in the same sense, IGMP can work that way too. I don't need every switch to be managed. I can have managed switches up high, which is what I do on my show. So I don't know if I told you guys, sorry, I got a little excited here. First time talking in front of people since COVID hit. So I'm the ring Gaffer on Mandalorian. And we've been slowly upgrading our system. We're fully managed this year, but we do use a lot of unmanaged switches. And so up high, we have all managed, and we drop down to unmanaged switches. But if I plug in a device into that unmanaged switch, like a couple nodes, there's no difference between 2 nodes requesting information, really than 1. So even though I have an unmanaged switch there, I'm still benefiting from the IGMP because they're both requesting down one line, if that makes sense. So you can mix them. Now, I probably wouldn't go managed, unmanaged, managed. That would get a little spicy.
You just have to keep track then, whatever port.
Yeah.
Your unmanaged switch, whatever port it's fed from, that's the VLAN that it's going to see, and then.
Exactly.
And then you do it that way?
So we do actually. So, and we'll get into this, but the Luminex switches, their group 0, their trunk is called their ISL ports, or their inter-switch link ports. That's what I said. Everyone's got a different nomenclature. So it's important. You got to read the manual, do the boring stuff. But that's how I do it on my show. So lighting is on VLAN 1. So I use Ratpac data spheres on my show at every distro. So I'll have my managed switch up high, and I'll have interlink ports for all the switches connected to each other, and then I will drop down VLAN 1 to the unmanaged switch. And so we have some node lunch pails and some things. So first unit does use network devices. Any light over 100 channels we like to put on the network because it just becomes so daunting with DMX. Sky Panel 360, some of these new Vortex lights, and it works great, no problem. But you just have to know that on that unmanaged switch, you're only seeing VLAN 1.
You do that to save money? Or
Yeah.
So there's less to set up? Or?
Save money. I mean, I would love a managed switch at every distro, but I think it would probably triple my costs. They're not cheap, And unfortunately, we're always limited by the price that the studio is willing to give us the switch, whether that's a fair price or not. Yes?
So because you're operating on this VLAN 1 from the Luminex,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't affect the broadcast versus multicast thing then down at the bottom if you're using an unmanaged switch?
No, it doesn't. So essentially, because you think the switch is doing it per port. So yes, if I have multiple devices down at the bottom from the unmanaged switches, it's going to send more information down that port. But I'm still, in my backbone of my network, I'm still not sending everything to that unmanaged switch, if that makes sense.
Hence it doesn't get dumped out.
Yeah, so that's why you can really do a healthy mix of managed and unmanaged if you can set up in the appropriate way. And I got some different types of networks, the way people set them up. But cost is always a factor, and the gaffer always gets his lights, and the rig's, a lot of times secondary, unfortunately, even though I think it's the most important. But you got to get that new Cineo reflex, and you got to have 4 360s, and you got to have all those big lights. And so we have to be economical. We always do. And I can't wait for the day where there's nothing but managed switches on set, and we can partition out those VLANs like that to anybody that needs it. It'll happen, but these are all new products, and so they're very expensive.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
You're saying set up the VLAN. Are you saying just like from this port on this switch to this port on this switch, like you're assigning the port?
Yes.
And that's the only way it can talk?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it like a,
No.
different level of like a, that's how it assigns that?
Precisely as you described it. So I log into the switch, I go into the interface, and I say, I want port 2 to be VLAN 1. Okay, the switch goes okay, boom. Now anywhere else in my network with a managed switch, I can make that VLAN 1, and those two devices will see each other, and only each other, or whatever else is on that VLAN. And I can do the same thing. I could have a VLAN over here and do the same thing, but you're assigning the ports at your leisure, how you want them to be.
So in your scenario where you have managed switches in every distro box,
Yeah.
say port 5 on all of them is for video, and they could use it for themselves.
Exactly. I set one up for sound and video, and then the rest for lighting. And you'll see later, I love colors, so everyone gets their own color. Hey, stay off the red, you guys are green, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, precisely. All right, so link aggregation. All right, so multiple ports send and receive the same information in unison. Okay, it allows for redundancy and can support higher bandwidth with multiple cables. 2 Cat6 cables can support more data than 1. It's often referred to as a leg port, but it's also called a trunk port, just like the VLAN port, so it can get a little confusing. It operates on layer 3 and it must be configured. It's not a typical plug-and-play feature. See, when I wrote that, Swisson does have a switch. I don't know if you're familiar with the new Swissons, the Swisson switch. Thank you, it's hard to say. And it's actually a VLAN switch, and it has 2 aggregated ports in the front. And it is pre-configured, but that is the only switch I know of that is pre-configured in that manner.
Is that like the STP ports on like Cisco switches so they can?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, I get scared every time I see a Cisco switch. Yeah, my brother-in-law is an IT guy. He's an IT guy in the military, and every time he talks to me, I think I know about networking until I talk to him.
Have you ever opened up the Proplex gigabit switch?
Yeah.
It's a Cisco switch inside it.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
But they've made that user interface so friendly,
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's been a while since I've used one, but I remember it being, right, you don't have access to all those super high-level features.
No, the ones I use were unmanaged.
Oh. Well, yeah, and that's the thing. There are simple Cisco switches, and there are complex ones. Every company makes a huge range of them. So yeah, just like Netgear. You have a simple Netgear switch, or you could have a crazy advanced Netgear switch. Oh yeah, some lighting switches do offer it out of the box. I did add that. Yeah. So link aggregation and bus technology, or topology. A bus works good. It helps support a robust trunk. It can have many VLANs. The main trunk will run the length of the network, and you can tap in and out of it. The redundant cables allow for faster speeds and larger bandwidths, and the bus acts as a large central network. It's not something I've ever had to do. I've never needed enough bandwidth. Some people like the redundancy feature. Some people hate it because there's no alert. So if you have 2 cables running and one cable goes bad, the switches keep operating because they got the one cable. You don't get an alert that says, hey, I lost one of my cables or something. So then if you go to troubleshoot, now you're sort of, the other cable goes bad. Wait a minute, which one, how was I doing it? Which one was connected? I tend to stay away from it. As the networks get bigger, we may need to do it in lighting. I have not ever had to. So not something I typically do.
So if you're going port switch with like your dimmer
Yeah.
You're just doing one where you're flowing through. You don't do like a circle. So you have redundancy where you go both ways.
So we're going to get to that, the loop network.
Is that sometimes that reduces the number of hops you have to do, right?
Yeah, because that is something that, you know, I've hops originally when I first started networking, I was always taught you don't want to do more than 7 hops. I've gone up to like probably 60, and I've not had a problem. Now that is in a managed network. So in an unmanaged network, yeah, but then again, the unmanaged switches don't have this, you know, advanced thing. Because if you want to loop your network, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it takes an advanced protocol called rapid spanning tree, and it's cool, but it also has a lot of issues, and it can, you know, it's something that can mess with your network. So I do loops, but what I don't do is I don't connect that last cable, and I, you know, label it in case of emergency, and plug it back in. But yeah, it's something you be careful of, and you know, a friend of mine, a friend of a friend, does big live shows, and even then they don't like to use it because it can do things like I know in the Luminex they have their own proprietary rapid spanning tree, and they even say in the manual can cause problems with non-Luminex devices. So I tend to shy away from that.
What are you using for your switches that you're putting in your distro to save costs?
Oh, so I'm using probably, depending on where I am in the rig, you know, and if I'm on stage, if I'm on location or that, I make sure everything has to have an Ethercon. It just has to have an Ethercon. So currently in all my distros, I put a data sphere from Ratpac. You know, it's the node, because I need a node and a switch at every distro. So that is my go-to. You know, sometimes they don't have that, so sometimes I'll just, you know, lay a switch and a node on top of it or whatever I can get my hands on. But that is
You're talking about like a Netgear switch, or
yeah, you could use a Netgear switch, but you know, it's just like I said, I have a friend right now doing a big show, and he's got Netgear switches on his distros, but they're being thrashed. You know, they're lightweight, and you can Velcro them, but those connections, people walk over, they kick, they trip, cables get pulled out. So I try to only use Ethercon switches.
So what's like the go-to?
Oh, Ethercon?
You have the Luminex up here.
Yeah.
What's your go-to?
I've used, so there's, as far as I can tell, there's only really like 3 unmanaged Ethercon. There's some other ones. There's like AVS sells one for audio. There's some audio Ethercon switches because I think that's where it started. But I use either a Swisson unmanaged Ethercon. I have one from ChromaQ I've used at time, and then the Ratpac DataSphere, which is obviously a node as well, but it's got an Ethercon switch inside. So those are kind of the 3 I choose, and it usually dictated by what the lamp dock has available and what price they're willing to give it to production. All right, so an important note here. A looped Ethernet system will bring down the entire network in an unmanaged system without rapid spanning tree protocol. I can't tell you, I had a guy move a DataSphere from one set to the other, had a little jumper, he plugged it in to itself, put the box down and plugged it in, the entire system went haywire. It took me 2 hours to figure it out, you know, because you have to, you got to check every port. I'm running around trying to figure it out. And you will, the types of things you see in a looped Ethernet issue is like your network will just disconnect. Everything will disconnect from itself, then rejoin, then disconnect, and rejoin, disconnect, and rejoin. And when you see that, you're probably seeing a looped system. And on that note, actually, I forgot to mention, in IGMP, if you see, a lot of times we get calls about drop universes. If you're seeing single universes not showing up, it's because it's an IGMP issue. And we'll talk about that a little more when we get to streaming ACN and why that is. But that's just, it is important to try and, when something's happening, to understand what problem could be causing that. And it may still be a total nightmare to figure out where somebody plugged in a 1x1 jumper. Yeah, you know, happened on another show, Legion. We had the lights all ready. Guy rolled in. Somebody walked by the dimmer board and just saw the little thing sticking out and went, oh, plugged it in. Yeah, brought down the whole system. That was a fun morning. All right. An unmanaged network, if any cables are looped or create a loop, it will bring down your network. Managed networks have protocols to protect against this. Rapid spanning tree protocol. It ensures a loop-free topology, but essentially blocks it is what it really does. I mean, there are more advanced ones now, but basically it blocks that port until it's not sensing the information from the other side, and then it opens it up. Yeah, redundancy safeguards. Okay, let me see what time it is. 2:44, okay. Excellent, all right, so let's put it all together. All right, so an IP network is a packet-based communication system. Any amount of information can be boxed up in packets and routed or delivered to its destination. And that's the key here with networking. Any information. That's the coolest thing about networking. No matter what information you have, it can be sent. Now, you may have trouble for one device to talk to another. That's something someone has to invent. But all information can be sent down there. And so, on Mandalorian, we have a video wall, and we were able to take the video stream we get from ILM, and we are able to integrate that into our lights, whether it's pixel mapping for effects, or even sun position in some sort of movement. And so we can track it with our lights. And when you're able to program it like that, it's far easier to let the program do the work than you. Once you set it up, you don't have to do anything else. And that's some of the coolest part about networking. All those little switches are working so hard, they're doing all that work for you. So that's my favorite thing about networking. It can be a little touch and go, but when it's up and running, it's a huge time saver, and it makes things run flawlessly. All right, so just ways I like to think about it, Like I said, I'm a rigging gaffer. I'm not an IT guy. So your packet is your mail or your package. Your subnet mask is like your zip code. IP is your destination address, and the router is the mail sorting station. Layers are adding routing information to be read by subsequent layers on the other side of the communication. All right? It's an in-house, think of it like an in-house company packing information. Like how FedEx, you send a package to FedEx, and FedEx puts some code on it because you're sending it to their routing station. And that's what these layers are doing in the model. A package goes on a pallet for freight transport across the country. In order for your mail, your package, to go to its final destination, it may have to go from its box to a pallet. And that pallet may have to go on a shipping container. And so basically, it's getting wrapped bigger and bigger in order to facilitate its transfer. And then once it gets to where it's going, it can be opened up, removed, and done like that. And that's the same way the network works, in a sense. So I got a little infographic coming up. Shipping container across the ocean. And then, of course, unmanaged is junk mail. Everybody gets everything. Managed network, only those meant to get the package receive the package. But obviously, you have to set that up. All right, but you see, so on the transmit side, it encapsulates each layer of data. And then it wraps a shell, whatever you want to call it. It adds to that packet. It helps it go through the pipeline to its next layer. And on the receive side, it decapsulates, it unwraps. So I have my information. I want to send an email and say, yo, what's up? As it's going through each layer is adding its own little piece and telling the other side how to decode it. Boom, boom, boom. Then it finally gets to the physical connection. It goes down your Ethernet line, and then each layer unwraps it. Now, this is all happening in like milliseconds. It's unbelievable. The amount of processing power and things these switches can do, it's unbelievable. And the ironic part is, oftentimes they can be cheaper than an optosplitter. And that's why networking is also great, because these devices are doing these insane amount of calculations, and yet they're so cheap because of the economies of scale. Because so many people have them, so many people need them. You get this insane amount of processing, with the same amount of money that you do just an optical splitter, and all it does is split your signal. So yeah, it's pretty incredible when you really think about all the stuff that's going on in those switches. Milliseconds. Probably microseconds. It's probably. All right, so set lighting networks. Here we go. Oh, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, maybe you're probably about to get into it.
No, yeah, let me go.
As a practice for you then, are you running like all your Sky panels network and no longer 5 times a day?
So what has happened in the past, and I got burned because when you run a light on a network, you have to rely on that light's network card. Now, ARRI is obviously, big time, multi-billion-dollar company. I'm not worried about their network cards. But sometimes, you get maybe a homemade type light or something like from somebody, you might get a network card that doesn't respond the same way, or it can't handle the information in the same way. And so my fear for doing that a lot of times is that I want all my lights to respond at the same time. So I try to use all the same nodes in front of my lights. Now, it hasn't been a problem, but it's just one of those things that's in the back of my head. I have used the Sky panels. I do network to them sometimes, and it is, it's case dependent on sort of how the rig's going, where it's going to be, what do I need to do from it, And there's a lot of questions. I try to limit my network devices. So having, we hang 100 sky panels. Having 100 sky panels on network, as opposed to one node, I'd rather have one node than 100 network devices. And that's just me. It's just like everybody else. What are you comfortable with on your rig, and how do you want it to function? But putting a switch in the middle of a softbox and running RJ45 will be substantially cheaper than renting DMX cable. So you could save a lot of money. Hey, that softbox rig is costing too much money. Well, I'll tell you what. Go on Amazon, buy this switch, buy me this cable, and we'll hook it up. Okay, so set lighting networks. All right, so the vast majority of set lighting networks that I've ran into are unmanaged. That's how most people I know use it. I don't know about you guys or how you do it, but typically that's what I see on most sets. Most networks follow the client-server method. It's a centralized lighting console or processor, and then usually somebody logs into it. That's more often than not how I see, but if you've other ways you set up your network, I'd love to hear it. Or any. Each console logs into the server session and then talks to the server, but the server is usually the one sending out the data. The console's telling the server what it wants. The server goes, okay, here's what we're doing. The structure of the network allows clients to log in from anywhere, no longer tethered to a single drop point of DMX. Networks are omnidirectional. DMX is or bidirectional, I guess, if you want to say it, but DMX is only one way. And that's, I don't know if you remember the days of old, but you used to rig giant locations. Maybe you got 4 universes, so you run your 4 male DMX there. Programmer shows up and goes, oh no, I need to be over there. And that's like the worst feeling in the world. But the flexibility of an access point all over the set. The programmer can be wherever they want, he or she. They can be right next to the camera. They can be on the other stage next door. To me alone, that's worth making the jump to networking. No longer tethered to that single point. Because so often than not, we're asking programmers to do so much, cues, timing. They often need to be right in the middle of it. Or there are lots of DPs that like the programmer right next to them. And so you never know where DP is going to set up, and they might change 3 times in the day. So having that access to me is one of the best features of networking. That freedom to move anywhere is just unreal.
Are you doing that by the network being strung up to hold until you move across, or by putting a board that's running as the server in the back room, and then you're just a client logging into that one? Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's typically how we do it. And you can also, most nodes will have a hold last look feature. So even if you don't have that, you can unplug from the network and they'll just hold that last output. You can set it for 5 minutes, 30 minutes, or forever. And so, if you don't have the money or capabilities on your show to maybe have that server and you only have the one board, that's something else we do. Like it's hugely important whenever we order a product. My programmer always, his biggest fear, his name's Derek, he's fantastic, is the set going dark. That is his biggest fear ever. And so whenever he talks to him about what he wants, he always wants to know that if he screws up or hits a button or does something, that set won't go dark. And so every node we put on set will hold last look. We always make sure that's a setting for him. Because I don't know if anyone's ever blacked out a set before. I've done it. It's not fun. And then you get nervous, and then you can't remember where things are, and then you can't see. So, yeah, it is not a good time. All right. And here's the thing about set lighting networks. So the main console typically dictates how the network is set up. And that's a big deal. I'll be first to admit, I'm not familiar with Hog very much. I know very little about it. Most of the shows I do, because of the Gaffer and program I work with, they're all Grand MA. We do some ETC stuff, but every board functions a little bit differently. And so that's another thing. Just like the switches from different companies may work differently, so do the consoles. And so it's really important to keep that in mind. And especially when I talk about Hog, if I got something wrong and you are Hog guys, please feel free to correct me. All right, so lighting console manufacturers, right? Who do we got? The big 3, I call them. Now there are more. There's Onyx. We got a couple Onyx guys back home, and there are a bunch of other ones. But for the most part, I think if you talk to people, there's big 3 that we hear about, and they all have their own proprietary protocol that they use. So you got Hog, whole Hog, high-end systems. It uses HogNet, recently bought by ETC. So I don't know if they're going to be merging or changing that, but that's how it currently is. ETC is the Ion, Geo, EOS. It uses ETCnet, which is streaming ACN based. And Grand MA3 uses MANet. All consoles process and disseminate information differently and offer different levels of control. All consoles are not created equal, and each console does excel in different things. That is a fact. They're all very good at something that maybe the other consoles aren't. Sorry, do you have a question?
No.
Oh, I got that light in my face. I just see movement. All right, so let's go through the big three, as I call them. All right, Grand MA. All channels are referred to as parameters. One full universe, I've never gotten a straight answer to this from MA, but we always just say a full universe is 512 parameters, but it's really not. Like 16-bit information is treated as one, and things like that. So, but if you're trying to plan out your rig, it's just a good rule of thumb. We always leave that headroom, D-rate equipment, make sure we're not maxing ourselves out. I don't know if you ever ran out of parameters on set or with your console, it's, yeah, hey, why isn't that universe working? Oh, we're maxed out. A universe can only have one channel active and be a parameter. Each MA board is only allowed so many parameters. They just came with 3. I still believe the going rate, you get 4,096 parameters with a Grand MA. But you can increase it with an MPU, and you can add as many MPUs as you want. I believe I think the old MA system capped at like 50,000, and I think the new one's like 250,000 with the MA3. Oh, there it goes, yeah, 250,000. I feel like it's the most flexible of the board networking-wise. It has all kinds of insane customization features with unicast and port filtering and really advanced stuff. And we don't even get into most of it, but you can set query times and you can do a lot of stuff on it that my rigging programmer is an ETC programmer, and so there's a lot of features that the ETC doesn't have. However, a lot of those advanced features in the MA are totally unnecessary for us. So it's great you can control them, but it can also shoot you in the foot, because if you don't understand what they are, they can be messing up your system. So good and bad. I always like to think of like a Mac and a PC. I think ETC's Mac and MA is kind of a PC. It is the most expensive too. Grand MA boards and their MPUs are very, very expensive. All right, that's what a full-size Grand MA3 looks like. It is a beast. Oh yeah, I think it costs more in my house. All right, ETC, electronic theaters control. Parameter count is limited to the largest console on the network. The console with the highest parameter count becomes the ceiling for the entire network. So you get a 60,000 channel board and you got a 40,000 channel board, and they're together, you get 60,000 channels. They don't stack. Consoles do not stack. And currently, and this might have changed, I don't know of any processing units for ETC that increase parameters. I believe they're coming out with one, but I don't think any exist currently. But typically, ETC is your best bang for your buck. You're going to get way more parameters out of the box than you would with an MA. I mean, at 4,000 parameters for a $50,000 board, that's not very much. And for ETC, you can spend half that and you can get 50, 60,000. Yeah. So then there's HOG, high-end systems. It uses universes, I believe, to control not parameters. It uses DP8000s to increase universe count, similar to an MPU. And actually, I think HOG just came out with a HPU. They're really cool. They have an awesome little screen on them, and they're very nice. And those are their new DP8000s. That's the HOG version of the MPU. There is no theoretical limit on universes. It's however much your console and network can handle, but obviously it will break down at some point, and where that ceiling is, I'm not as familiar, I don't know where, but I've seen people push huge amounts of data, so I don't think it's anything we'd run into. Consoles are connected by HogNet, and it is typically ran separate from their DMX network. So most guys that run HOG run 2 completely isolated networks from each other, and this goes back to the unmanaged part. If they were running a managed network, they could assign different parts of that HOG board to different VLANs. But HOG is, at least out in Los Angeles, HOG was sort of the first intelligent board to really hit the scene. And back in those days, nobody was running managed switches. So in order to keep the network separate, we would physically run 2 separate cables with 2 separate switches to everything. And there are still a lot of big-time programmers that still do the same thing. Nothing wrong with that, Whatever works for you. HOG rigs, there you go. There's a whole HOG. 4 ETC Geo, very nice looking boards. All right, So patching, right? Gotta have the patch, right? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, just the learning curve on the hog thing for me, because I primarily use that in ATC.
Uh-huh.
But one thing I never realized, and as I was learning, because I'm all self-taught on the IT stuff too, was that for any, if you want to use Ethernet protocol, SACN, or ArtNet, you actually have to hook up HogNet as well. You can't just take your board and plug in to FixtureNet.
Okay.
You have to create your HogNet system between your processing and your console or your switches or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just plug into the FixtureNet. Like, you can't just use the streaming ACN without hooking up HogNet.
I got you. I didn't know that. Yeah, because you think if you just have like say one light, you should be able to plug the board. Yeah, but that doesn't work. Huh, see, good to know. And we really drill at home. I don't know where everybody's from here. I don't know if you guys are all Chicago people mostly. No. But we have. In fact, we're talking about it. Maybe getting like a cross-local programmers page together, because I can't tell you how many times that we just figure this stuff out together. Hey, I got this weird problem with my set, or hey, this isn't working, or hey, how'd you guys do this? And everybody, the jobs are also different. Everyone's facing different challenges and solving them. And so by pooling our information and seeing what we're all doing, we all grow. And we all work together. And I think that's the ironic part. The most important part of networking is networking. Yeah. So it's just something I say it over and over and over again. And I don't know how it is out here, but lots of people that are rigging gaffers, they try to dump the entire network onto the programmers. And we'll get into the patching here is a big thing. And I just think that's completely unfair. You're asking way too much of the programmer. They're on set, they're doing all this work, they don't have time to manage this whole network. It's part of the rig now. In the same way the patch is part of the rig. A guy told me, oh, the lights work? Oh yeah, we tested on a Swisson. That doesn't count. It has to be tested with the console, and I have to know when that programmer brings up that fixture number that it works with his board. It's not his problem, it's everybody's problem if that light doesn't work. It's my responsibility as a rigging gaffer to know when they show up, that light's going to turn on when they want it to. And so, it's a big deal for me, but I think we really need to change the way we think about it, and we need to make sure that the network can no longer be shoved off, to one person or two people. It's everyone's responsibility, and it's just as integral as our power. They work hand in hand. All right, so patching, right? In order to actually bring up a light, you got to patch it, right? So what is a patch? Console is giving a starting address of a light, usually how many there are, and then what mode the light's in. Most modern lights can be controlled in many different ways. Referred to as personalities or modes, they can be extremely different. I think Astera, who are down there, I think they are up to the 90s in profiles, last time I checked.
Addresses? They have some that use over 100.
Yeah, no, as far as like just different profiles you can choose, I think they have like 90 profiles. Yeah, so there's a lot out there. It can be daunting. So, it's really important to pick what you want. We just changed to XY on our show. And so, yeah, I don't know if you guys are familiar with XY color space. That's a whole nother talk, new to me, but it's just a different way. Instead of using hue and sat, you essentially have a Cartesian plane of color, and you're choosing it based upon points. And it can be really easy for color matching. We have a lot of problems with matching video wall color and stuff. So Gaffer can take his meter, match it, and then match it to the light very easily. So, all have their drawbacks, right? There's no give without a little take, and vice versa. Yeah, and ARRI Sky panel can be 8 or 120 channels. I think that was the most last time I looked, but who knows with ARRI, they probably have 3 more profiles out. You probably do a hologram on that thing now. The console then patches the light. The address for information in the console must match the information on the lights. We all know that. They have to sync up. Lights that can take Ethernet direct will typically have an advanced menu that allows the user to select what universe and address they are be. And I think that's important. Even with networking, we're still limited by DMX. You can't just give a light an IP and say work. You still have to give it a universe and an address to patch it into the console. So I know there are people at ESTA, I believe, working on a new standard for DMX. I don't know if there's any ESTA people here. But yeah, I believe it sounds like it's going to be a daunting process. But yeah, universes aren't used the way they used to be. Typically, we use them as separation tools. Instead of filling up universes, it's all the sky panels on this stage are universe 4, and then the next stage are 5, and that way, you keep things separated, right? Keep them separated. All right. Even networking lights still succumb to DMX and address. All right. So here's a little patch here from the MA. All right, you see there it contains the light type, the name, the fixture type, what mode it's in, and then the universe and the address. The fixture ID is the number that you actually use to call up the light. You know, I get that all the time. People call it the address or whatever, but you know, we try to relate the fixture number to the patch. Some people don't like that because they think they're too similar, so they do it different. You know, any way you want to design your fixture numbers, you know, that's up to you. But obviously, you don't want two with the same fixture number. That would be, well, you can't, but anyway. We typically use the MA thing here with where the universe is first with a decimal point, and then the address. I know ETC does the slash, same thing. You know, just how do you like it written? The fixture ID is obviously the most important. That's what the gaffer needs to know. That's what he needs to see, and that's how he communicates with the programmer. You know, MA layout. So, you know, we build a layout, or I don't. My rigging programmer builds the layout view of every set, makes vector work plots for the gaffer. You know, this here is probably the most important thing. You know, the gaffer being able to look at a piece of paper and know exactly what light he wants, and the programmer knows exactly where it is. And by using the layout view, you know, if the gaffer's unsure what a light is, he can describe where it is and they can find it really quickly. I couldn't do a show probably nowadays without Vectorworks on the rigging side. It is an invaluable tool, building sets, doing things like that. We give our UPM our Vectorworks plots now. She's fascinated by them. But, you know, I always say once again in my experience, they don't really know what we do. You know, they think riggers pull a cable and programmers are button pushers. And it's kind of up to us to educate them and to show them, hey, lighting has taken a huge quantum leap. Look what we're doing. Look at what you're seeing. And I find most of the time they're very impressed. And that when they get impressed, that translates to typically better rates and maybe a little better rental. But you know, they want to know that you're not just taking advantage of them. And when you show them how complicated this is, I think most of them are very understanding and go, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea this is what lighting has become. And so, you know, Vectorworks plots, things like that, you know, we love to show them off. You know, hey, look at what we're doing.
Do you carry a rigging programmer?
Oh yeah.
Have you run into resistance with that? And trying to say you don't need it, and you convincing them, no, we really do?
I have. You know, I did a show a couple years ago, and I let them convince me I didn't need one, and it was an unmitigated disaster. And after that, I just said, you know, I hate to do it. I call it the used car walkout. You know, believe it or not, I was just telling them, I will negotiate for my programmer before myself. Like that's how important that position is to me. You know, and you know, because the programmer, as much as I know about the board, I can patch and build groups. That programmer has a level of knowledge that I can't compete with. You know, I can run cable, I can solder, I can do all those jobs, but I cannot do what he does. His name's Tom Howard. He's fantastic, and so he is the most important thing to me as a rigging gaffer, personally. I mean, I'm able to give my guys maps and just hand it to them, and you know, they can see exactly where these lights go over the set. It just has simplified the rigging process so much. You know, I used to get napkin drawings from gaffers, you know, on barroom napkins they drew at lunch. And you know, having these Vectorworks plots with the fixture IDs, with the DMX IDs, it just really makes it makes lighting professional. That's a professional way to handle the set, a professional way to handle things. And it just doesn't work without a rigging programmer, you know? I mean, if you've got over 4 or 5 universes, you got to have it. Drop loads. But I do hear horror stories. You know, I hear these programmers will show up to location, rigging crew is rigged, you know, 60 Asteras. They're not addressed, they're not teched, and they expect the programmer to show up there like an hour before call and do it. And that's total bonkers to me. And you know, maybe in the days of old when the programmer was on expressions and all you had to do was bring up channel 1 or channel 2, you know, you get away with that. But it's totally different now, and everyone needs to accept that. And I do always feel for my programmer friends. I hear horror stories of what they have to go through sometimes. But yeah, I don't think I do a show without a rigging programmer. Well, okay, so I did do a show during COVID, right near the end, where we didn't have a rigging programmer. However, we didn't have any smart lights. It was very old school, tungsten. We used arc lights, things like that. And the one location we did go big, we had a rigging programmer. So, the whole thing, you know, budgets are my thing. That's what you have to do. Budgets, spreadsheets. Productions love to know what things are going to cost. And I think the biggest problem with rigging programmers and stuff like that is that the rigging gaffers don't factor that into their budget. And if day one, I can walk up to the UPM and say, just so you know, I need this position and I need this rental and he needs this, they're like, okay. You know, it's only when you're like getting closer to the show, you're already rolling, they're going, wait, how much money am I going to spend over a 30-week season for this guy? And you know, they're not ready for that hit. And so I think getting in early and often is so important. You know, my gaffer starts the rigging programmer before his best boy. They sit there together and go over plots. It's not like a two-party system anymore. It's a three-party system. You know, it's lighting control, rigging, and first unit. And so I think it's the most important position, and I don't think they get enough credit. And yeah.
What software do you guys use for the plots?
Vectorworks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, all good. And then yeah, we still, even though they all have MA3s on my show, we only use 2 mode yet. They don't feel ready for prime time yet. I know some of my friends do use 3, but our lead programmer is a little apprehensive about the 3 because it's pretty new. Yeah, Vectorworks. And I'll tell you what, when I'm trying to get a bunch of lights approved, and I can show a 3D rendered stage with the buildings in there and the lights going through each window, all of a sudden, 20Ks makes sense when the producer can see it. But when it's an empty stage and you're telling them, they go, I don't get it, And you can draw it on a piece of paper and you can try to explain it to them. But that tool of having the 3D, seeing is believing, right? We work in film, that's the whole thing. People read a book, they don't want to watch a movie. And so when you can deliver that to them, it just, the impact of it, I can't stress enough. I just think it's vastly, vastly important. And I've dabbled with Vectorworks, and I can build stuff, but I'm nowhere near as good as some of these guys. It's unbelievable what I've seen people build. All right, okay. All right, show files, right? Everyone's got a show file. The patch is often the main part of the show file. A show file will also contain lighting groups, specialized lighting effects, unique color palettes, usually grows over the course of the show. Lots of programmers will move their show, have a base show file they use for every show that has things they've built. Sometimes each stage has its own show file, and then or you just have one large show file. So that's a big debate back home. What's the best system? Is it best to have each stage be isolated and be its own show file, or to have one large show file? And we run into problems because we have so many units where it's, hey, this unit did a bitch and fire effect or this crazy hyperspace thing. We want to copy that. Well, that's a different show file. Hold on, we got to do this. So we use one show file. We have every board is logged into the same show file at once. That does leave rooms for issues. If you slip on your finger, you could bring up lights on another stage, you could kill a cue, you could do a lot of stuff. So it does require some discipline. I have blacked out the set testing lights. Thank God they were at lunch, but right when they called cut. So just something to keep in mind. Like I said, every system has its plus and minuses. There's nothing foolproof. Yeah, each style has its benefits. All right. So DMX control on a network. Here we are, ArtNet. And once again, I'll be the first to admit, I haven't used ArtNet in years. We do everything streaming ACN, so some of this information about ArtNet might not be perfect. So once again, if someone wants to correct me, please do. It was the first DMX over Ethernet protocol. ArtNet 1 was released in 1998 by artistic license, privately created but royalty-free. ArtNet 1 uses broadcast. You can only do 40 universes. The current version is ArtNet 4, and on paper, I'm told it can support 32,768 universes. Last I had checked, most consoles were only supporting ArtNet 1 through 3. There may have been recent updates. I don't stay up in the ArtNet news. I won't lie. The one thing ArtNet does, and what we're going to learn later, is it supports RDM, which is big. Because currently streaming ACN does not, but it sort of does, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you want to use RDM on your network, unfortunately, you either have to go, like what I'll do is I have a softboxer with lights. I'll make sure I have an RDM optosplitter in there, and I'll run the DMX up. And then if I do need to readdress a light, I can plug in my DMX cat or my Swiss in, and I can do it that way. Because my console can't talk to it from there because of our streaming ACN. So there are workarounds and ways to do it. Lots of guys are ArtNet. They like that because I know the RDM feature is huge for them. ArtNet is a data hog. Now, saying it cannot be run on the same cable, that's probably oversimplifying it. It shouldn't be ran on the same cable. Now, if you're managing your network and doing a VLAN, yes, you can, but ArtNet is known to use much, much more data than streaming ACN. All right, but yeah, most consoles have a separate RJ45 port for ArtNet. You'll see that in the back of an MA. ArtNet gets its own port. All right, so ArtNet uses ArtPool to figure out where to send the information. It's sort of like their own little proprietary IGMP snooping. It asks what devices are on the network and then sends them the requested information through unicast. ArtPool is very similar to IGMP but less efficient because all packets are unicasted or broadcasted. Because ArtNet 4, I haven't had a chance to really use it. I'm not sure if they've updated it to a multicast. So actually, I'm going to make a note to add that, something to look up. ArtNet's default IP range is 2 dot, but you can use other ranges. ArtNet wraps each universe of DMX and sends it to a node, just like how we watched how the networking information happens. That DMX data is encapsulated, sent down the line, and the device decapsulates, gets the DMX data. Oh, shoot, I think I skipped one. Doot, doot, doot. Now it's working. All right, unwanted packets of universes of DMX are discarded by the node. So if the node doesn't need those universes, it just throws them out. It's an important note. Running a standard DMX signal on cat cable is not a network protocol. This happens all the time. You see those like LED decoders, they all have RJ45 ports, but most of them are not a network device. It's just a cheaper connector than a 3 or 5 pin XLR. So you have to physically run a DMX signal over that cable. And this is the #1 issue I get calls about. DMX can be run on almost any 3-conductor cable, and like oftentimes people use RJ45 ports because they're cheaper. So DMX on cat cable is not DMX over Ethernet, and that's important to remember. DMX must be encoded and encapsulated to work properly on network devices. All right, so ArtNet, the newer interfaces clean this up for you, but it used hexadecimal addressing, which we went over with some of our MAC addresses and IPv6. So essentially, 0 is 1, 1 is 2, 2 is 3, and so on until you go to letters, and A is 11, C is 13, till all the way to 16. So it uses a net, subnet, and universe. ArtNet addressing is really fun. But note, the ArtNet subnet is not the same as a network subnet. And most new devices, thank God, do translate hexadecimal into a very friendly version. But it is important to remember, ArtNet starts at 0, not 1. Now, I believe in the hog, you can change that, and you can just disable universe 0, but there's an offset there, and lots of people, that's a big thing people get confused by. Universe 1 is universe 0. So if you can see there, the subnet is the prefix in front of the actual net. So you see it's 0, 1. So it's subnet 0, universe 1. And so when you go to 18, so you have that, it's multiples of 16. So you go, that's 6, that 1 translates to a 16, and that 0 translates to a 1, so it's 17. And that's why it can get a little daunting, especially as you get into the higher numbers. I highly recommend a cheat sheet like this. It can be really frustrating. But once again, the newer devices do this for you, but I still run into legacy ArtNet devices with hexadecimal and things like that, and it's important to know, because you never know what's going to show up on that drop load, especially if you got a time crunch at a location. All right, streaming ACN, my buddy. All right, it wraps DMX like ArtNet to go through network devices. Unwanted packets or universes of DMX are discarded by the node. Just like ArtNet, streaming ACN is DMX over Ethernet. It plays nicely with other protocols. It allows the use of only one cable. We've put a lot of different protocols with our streaming ACN and have yet to really have an issue. I'm not saying you won't, but it definitely plays much better than ArtNet. It uses something called universe synchronization to make sure the node gets all the packets before it puts out the DMX information. So there's like a header on the packet that says, hey, there's this much information coming. And so it makes it wait until it gets the whole packet, and it goes, okay, now send it out. So it works really well for timing. You're going to get that, make sure it's all sending out that information at the same time. It's multicast based. That's the thing to remember. Streaming ACN is built on multicast. So you can broadcast it, but that means for streaming ACN to work properly, you have to use managed switches. You can totally use unmanaged switches. It won't affect it, but that is what it was how it was built. And it can also be unicasted like MA. So if you have a network device, it happens a lot with wireless transmitters. So we find on our show 38 universes is about the limit for our wireless transmitter. Node can take 150. So you could put a node in front of your transmitter. You could manage your network, or you can sometimes, like MA allows you to unicast. So I can go on the network and say, hey, only send this universe to this IP address. And that way I can make sure I'm not flooding that device with everything on the network. But that can get a little complicated. All right. And theoretically, you can have 64,000 universes of streaming ACN. I don't think you could ever get that many in real life, but that's what the data says. Newer than ArtNet, most shows I find are making the jump to streaming ACN. I don't know if you guys have a favorite out here. ArtNet, streaming ACN. Yeah, I'm gonna get on my knuckles, you know. I always call it SACN, you know, for short. But yeah. History of it, a little backstory. Developed by ESTA, of course, our friends at the Entertainment Services and Technology Association. Started as ACN, Architecture of Control Networks. It was this really ambitious project. They were going to build this crazy protocol that could do everything for the entertainment industry. And I don't just mean TV and film, I mean the entertainment industry. So live events, anything. It was going to be one protocol. It was going to do it all. It was going to do everything. It was going to be the best thing ever. And it was too complicated. So they were like, you know what, let's try something else. However, though, they realized that the lighting part of it worked really well. So they named it Streaming ACN, and it was released in 2006. Now, there's an important note. You don't really see it anymore. There was draft Streaming ACN and Streaming ACN. And you'll see it on a lot of products. It'll say supports draft and supports Streaming ACN. And essentially what happened was when it first got put out, maybe the beta, whatever you want to call it, it worked a little differently. And when they basically released it for full, they changed it. And so it's just something that happens. I've never seen a device recently that only takes draft. But it's just something to keep in mind, and that's what you're seeing when you see that. Yeah. All right, sorry, water break. We'll take a breather. Anybody questions?
Do you have any questions, or are there any issues with latency when it comes to dealing with wired and wireless networks?
I try my damnedest. My first unit carries 8 universes of wireless. They have a cart they call the Droid, and they roll it over around. They got a little decal, like R2D2 decal on it. So I never ever try to rig anything wireless. You know, but there's between them, camera, sound, remote heads, all that stuff. I just, you know, the only time I would ever do wireless is where I have to, like on a location, cross streets, things like that. Because yeah, I have had lots of problems. You know, it's just the nature of there's so much wireless traffic right now, and that's I know ESTA's working on that along with the locals to kind of figure out a way to standardize who's on what bandwidths, adding a frequency coordinator to sets. You know, down where we film Mandalorian, we're right next to the airport, and Raytheon, who makes top secret stuff for the government. So we have like no wireless reception. Whatever's going on down there, it just eats it alive. Yes, sir.
I was always curious about that too, but in the previous slide, it's just what you said.
Yeah.
You didn't say 38 universes wireless. You just said 8. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought you said 38. My mind was like 20.
No.
Man, it's 38. Dang.
No, they have 8 universes, yeah. All right, what do we got here? Okay, so streaming ACN in the OSI model. Bringing it all together. Very exciting, right? So we got streaming ACN is the user, layers 5 through 7. Layer 4 is the transport layer. It's assembled into user, that's the UDP. That's the user datagram protocol packets. That's the capsule, right? That's what's going over the DMX data. All right, so layer 3 is where the multicast addressing is handled using IGMP snooping. The data link layers, the Ethernet switches, are managing the packets based on their MAC addresses, so they're building their routing tables within themselves. And then layer 1, that's the physical layer. That's the cables. That's the physical connections of the network. Those can be wireless. It doesn't have to be physical, but that's how it's connecting to itself. So the streaming ACN wraps up each universe of DMX and sends it to a node or similar device where the packet is unwrapped and read. All right, see? It only took 2 hours to get there, but there it is. Okay, so streaming ACN and RDM, or how to TCB with TCP. Streaming ACN does not support RDM. So I think our friends at EST over there, RDMNet was created to work with streaming ACN as multiple protocol. Streaming ACN plays well with other protocols. I should probably put a date on this because I wrote this a year ago. So I think it was, yeah, RDMNet 2019. So although it was released, as you'll find with a lot of things, it's up to the manufacturers to implement these things. So just because something exists doesn't mean you can use it, and that can get frustrating. But hopefully RDMNet will take off, and I think it opens a lot of new cool things for us. My friend Matt Ardeen made this graphic, so I always give him credit. He made puzzle pieces, but I couldn't get mine to do it. But you know, RDMNet really opens the door, I think, for a lot of cool things. Addressing entire banks of lights from a console, updating your entire lighting rig. So I don't know where the ceiling is on RDMNet, but I really feel like that's going to give the a huge amount of functionality to these lights. And it's going to be really interesting as it does get implemented, the level of control that we're able to use. And I don't think RDM will be something we have to disable and re-able. It'll really, as it gets better and better, it's going to change the way we do stuff. Yes?
Features like things like the already order can get color temperature and color data back to the console?
Yeah.
So that's what you're kind of full.
Exactly. It just allows back talk from the lights. So, in theory, it can do any of that stuff, but it just has to be designed that way, But that's the genius of that protocol. It just allows the lights to give information back.
One more follow-up question. Are there consoles that are currently offered? Do they have this capability built in to get all this data from the lights yet? Or is this still something that's in development on the console side?
As far as I know, I don't know of any consoles that have it currently. They're constantly updating it. It is so hard to stay up on the news, but I'm not aware of it personally. But I feel like it's something that people really want, and so it will be coming out. But if the lights don't do it, then what's the point of the consoles doing it? So I don't know. It's almost like someone has to do it first. All right, chicken or the egg? Who's going to do it? Okay. Okay, so here's something else to keep. This is about streaming ACN and how it works. Due to the nature of lighting networks, packets are multicasted and broadcasted to certain IP addresses. All right, this can be extremely relevant when you're troubleshooting. All right, so the default multicast address for streaming ACN, 239.255.x.y, right? Blanks. Okay. X and Y are the streaming ACN universe number. So when a streaming ACN node goes online, it requests its universe using these IP addresses. That's how it requests universe 1. That's what it's telling the things it wants, and that's how the packets are labeled. So that's how it's getting what it needs. That's what's in the pool. So yeah, and they're added to multicast groups. So the switches build multicast groups with the MAC addresses based upon what they're asking for. All right, ArtNet's default broadcast address is 255.255.255. It's based off, it's a little more complicated, but it's based off the IP of the network's leading octet. It can also be transmitted to either of those two devices. But if you go on your network and you're seeing these IP addresses and you're going, what the heck are these IP addresses? I don't understand. I don't have any devices in that number. Those are the universes themselves, and that's how they're being referred to within the network.
Why would they use public IP addresses though? It's not like a private IP address range.
I don't have a good answer for you. I guess ArtNet's not my thing. Every time, I don't want to discount it. I know lots of people use it very well, so I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just that's the way they do what they do. And I'm sure if I was a little more familiar with ArtNet, I might have a better answer for you. That's why if anyone...
Even the SACN, wasn't it 239?
Yes, but it's not a device. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's not a device. So it's requesting it. That's how it's... There's no physical device that has that IP. And so I'd have to look at the IP ranges, but I bet if we do, if you look at that 239 range, I bet you it's reserved for things in that nature in the programming code. But that's a good question. I'm going to look that up because that's an excellent point. All right. Where were we? This remote goes in and out. Okay. Okay, no, we went over this. Boop, boop, boop. All right, topology of lighting networks, right? So most lighting networks typically do hub and spoke. That's how we like to do it. Server is the center, and we branch out from there. Bus topology can use, if you got a bunch of stages next to each other, it can be very beneficial to just run that heavy line down the middle, and you can tap into it. Ideally, I've always told, this is what I've always been told in practice, no more than 7 switches. I've used a lot, and I've never had a problem. There is something that happens where if you have a network with multicast data that's not being used properly, essentially what happens is the packets kind of circle the network, and they call it time to death, or it's like time to die. If it goes through the same switch 7 times and like it hasn't gone somewhere, it just gets rid of it because it doesn't know where to send it. So this is something that comes up with unmanaged networks and things like that. But if you have everything set up right, it's not something that I've ever had to worry about or a problem. I think this is dealing with older networks in the unmanaged days. Okay, yeah, you could have multiple stages in the same project or different show files. However you want to set it up. Okay, obviously hub and spoke can be a lot more efficient than point to point. That was the old way of doing things. I don't think anybody runs a point to point network. That would be 10 times. There's our bus topology. And okay, the Mandalorian, here we go. So this is a show I've been working on for the past few years. It's a lot of fun. We're very data heavy. The first unit has a Grand May, and we have 5 stages this year, and we connect our stages using the studio's VLANs. Now, an issue we're having now, and we're trying to figure it out, we're unable to send our trunked port through the studio's VLAN. We can only send our lighting VLAN through their VLAN. It doesn't allow it based upon, I'm sure it has to do with the encoding of the information, but it won't let us do it. And so I'm actually working with their IT department. I have emails going right now, and we're trying to make that better. But it's a common problem in a lot of lots. But it's a really easy way to connect your stages if you want them all to talk to each other. Every lot probably has Ethernet cables running everywhere. And so you go, hey, I need 21 to talk to 22, and they go, oh yeah, go to port D27 on the wall, on this stage, on the other stage. Sometimes they'll give you an IP range, sometimes you have to use a router. It's all dependent on the lot's IT structure. But it's super beneficial, I think, to have all your stages connected. It's really nice. Once again, I know plenty of guys that do $150 million movies, and they don't like their stages connected at all. They want everything to be separate.
Does it help you share the same show file?
Exactly. So that way, no matter what one unit's doing, it's all building on the same show file, and we can recall that information, So first unit shooting on this stage that day, and they move over, and this guy moves that way, and the set moves over there, they still have all that information in that show file. We have one master console that we keep over by my table. We call it the server, and we use 4 MPUs most of the time. Sometimes we go up. That's our hub. At any given time, we have 3 consoles on the network usually, and sometimes we've had up to 6. That's rigging, that's 3 units, myself, the programmer. I have a console that I push around. But yeah, we have a lot of consoles. Every single light on that show is controlled by the board. I don't know if you're familiar with the show, if you've ever seen like the Imperial Bridge or anything like that, the insane amount of single channel LEDs we have. And every single one of those, we have control of every single one of those LEDs individually. Because they have a weird angle, so the camera's looking this way, and all of a sudden that light that's super dim is hitting it just right, and now it's super offensive. And so we have control of every single little LED. I have more channels in single LEDs than I've ever seen in my life.
Are those 4 MPUs just one on each stage, or
No,
racked together?
Rack together. I think I have a picture in here somewhere coming up, but yeah, all in a big rack together. All right, so yeah, there it is, yeah. So, this is what I call a data spider. Oh, sorry. It's what I have up high on all my stages. I usually have anywhere from 2 to 3, sometimes 4 or 5 on my stage. This is not what I currently use. That's an old unmanaged version, but this was kind of the beginning of it. This is what I started using on Legion. This is kind of where this whole started for me, the networking thing. I worked on some shows, Ghost in the Shell here and there that use a lot of data, and we started networking. But Legion, we just started doing. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the show. It was the season 2, and we needed so much data, and I'd never done a show that needed that. My first show I ever worked on was Ocean's 13. We had an entire casino with individual control of this whole casino for this earthquake effect, and we weren't even at three full universes, And now I've got 3 full universes, on the back half of a bar with pixel map tubes. It's crazy. So you know, I always try to rig my data with far more than I need. You know, in the old days, you used to always try to cram everything into that one universe or two universes, and now it's like, leave room, leave it open. Don't try to cram, don't try to fill it up, you know. Utilize all that network infrastructure. Don't make it hard on yourself, make it easy on yourself, you know. And that way, if you do need to add something last minute, you've got a little headroom on all your universes. You know, there's nothing more embarrassing than Gaffer calls for 20 Sky panels last minute, and you can't power them because you don't have data available for it. I mean, that's worse than, you know, it's like not having the power available. You know, nobody rigs a stage with 100 amps, so why are you only rigging it with one universe? You know, anticipate your needs. It's going to get used. All right, so Mandalorian, the wireless. Here we go. So alongside each stage, on every stage we hang a wireless access point. We have a single DHCP server. We can set, inside the DHCP server, you can set the pool up. So we have about 10 available IP addresses, and this allows us to log into the network with our phone or an iPad or various other things. But we actually have, I think on set, typically there's at least 2 set lighting technicians with iPads queuing effects. That's how much effects we have on that show. It's a lot. Yeah, a lot of remote diets, mostly tablets, logging and lighting network. Cue triggers, fixture focusing, key light adjustments, lots of stuff. I mean, the Gaffer has his own iPad too, you know, and sometimes even the DP gets one. You know, everybody wants to be able to adjust certain things, and sometimes radioing back is harder than just doing it yourself. Here you go. Yep, exactly. Wi-Fi does have latency, and so it can be problematic with timing and things like that. So it's not the is-all be-all, but you know, we do triggers with it, and we've had good luck. But you know, I wouldn't always rely on it. All right, so data and power. How do we get the data from the network to set, right? How does it go? How do you do? You know, the network's like 480 volts. You can't plug a light into 480, right? So how do you go from 480 to 120? You got to have step downs. So as we saw earlier, the data's ran alongside power, and it's dropped off to our distros. Distros are where set lighting techs access power from the large feeder circuit, the step downs, baits, lunch pails, we all know that stuff. GAC, as we call it, or I don't know if that's a term back home. The same way, we drop the Cat6, and then we break that down into more user-friendly parts. You know, I use the data sphere just because it's a node lunch pail, it's a node switch in one, but you know, I find I need a node switch at every distro, and you know, however you get there, you know, it's all the same. But that way, the SLTs can actually access the data. So network lights can go on the switch, DMX lights can go on the node. All right, DMX ports for P2Bs and all that other stuff. Yeah. So what we do is we call them super duper baits. We take 2 DMX cables and we tape them to baits, and essentially we have dual PDBs on set. You know, we have multiple dual PDBs, and we run those out to set. So they plug them back in at the node, and that's how we get our universes directly to set. Now there is a node lunch pail, and there are some more coming out, but I can't wait for that day. But currently this is our best system, unfortunately, and it's a lot of E-tape and a lot of super duper baits. I think we just made about 100 of 50s and 100 hundreds last week. Yeah, can't have enough data. We also use we call them super stingers, integrated DMX and extension cord. You know, originally when we did those, we had to tape those together as well. The manufacturers finally wised up, and now we can get them all in one friendly jacketed cable. Larger lights can take their Ethernet. We call them ether baits, same thing. We also have Ethercon cables taped to baits that we run out, or ether stingers, depending on the size of the light. And you know, we have to make them. That's the most frustrating part. You know, my whole thing, I've started working with manufacturers because I've been extremely frustrated. When I first started networking set lighting, I had to essentially buy everything because I couldn't rent it. No lamp dock had switches, you know, and if they had a node, they had 2. And so a big part for me is I just want to be able to order the pieces that I need to make my rig happen. And so I'm very excited as we move forward that we no longer have to piecemeal or make things. I know that some lamp docks are talking about purchasing rental ether baits and things like that. So moving forward, I think that's a huge part of making networking easier is by having the gear that we need available. And if I have to, every time I'm at a location and I have to distribute DMX and Ethernet, if I have to tape DMX cables to baits, that's a huge time suck. You know, and productions don't like that. What are you having guys doing that are making $40+ an hour? They're taping cables together. And I've actually made deal with lamp dogs back home to keep those cables taped together because it has become such a tedious process.
I got a question on that.
Yeah.
You don't run into problems with noise on the data lines coming from the baits?
No.
So, yeah, so that's kind of proof that you don't need shielded,
Yeah.
because that's the worst case scenario if you're right next to a high power line.
And I mean, it's got, you know, it's got the neutral there, and you know, the inductance. You know, it's like the whole thing. It's like if you leave a baits cable coiled, right? They always say, right, the inductance will make it heat up, but it's like, well, no, it won't, because it will get hot, but not because of the inductance. You know, the neutral and the line, they're inverse of each other, so they're really kind of canceling each other out. But if you leave a cable in a coil, it gets hot because of for other reasons. But yes, exactly. It just, and there's typically not enough power going through that baits. Now, if I was running T12s on it, maybe, but no, most of the time I'm plugging in 4 sky panels. So the amperage pull on it's so minimal.
Yeah, it's like a dimmed HMI is the worst, right?
Yeah.
For noise.
And those we don't run off super duper baits. Like if the gaffer does want the DMX control, that's, you know, the ballast is over there and that's getting a cable to it. Yeah, but we use this light. I don't know if I have a picture on here, but we call it the UFO, and it's 9 AirMaxes on this lighting crane that we use for our day exteriors. And so that's a fun one. We have to put it together every other week. But yeah, that cable is juicing. So I wouldn't run DMX next to that cable. All right, so wireless DMX, right? Most first units carries receivers. All right, I'm actually going to blow. You use it as a last resort. You know, I try not to use it when I rig. Sorry, I'm going to jump together. So putting it all together, current available products force SLTs and riggers to Frankenstein products together. You know, this is my data spider that I built, and you know, I used to have these distro toppers that I made with nodes and switches together. Got this from Ratpac, was very excited, but I'm still limited by my end-of-the-line PDB device. I know we got some node lunch pails that are coming out. I'm very excited. You know, it's going to become, it needs to be as dynamic as it is. You know, when I first started Mandalorian, the first thing the gaffer told me, I didn't do the first season, #1 issue, the light was almost always in the wrong universe when they plugged it in. Almost always. Yeah, and so he said it's beyond a little problem. And so my goal has always been to try and make that as simple as possible. And I think I have a picture here. No, oh man, it's coming up later. We'll look at it later. But anyway, we kind of know all this. I'm gonna skip over that. We're getting short on time. You know about lighting setups. It's all about organization. You know, it's got to be organized. You know, the rigging crew goes home. The first unit guys take over. You got day players on set. You can't. It has to be logically laid out in a way where somebody can show up and understand how it works. I give every data spider a letter, and then each Ethernet cable correlates to a letter and a port number in that switch. And so, hey, what's this cable's not working? Oh, it's 1E. Oh, that's the first port on switch E. And so we leave little maps put up where does that switch exist and how to get it. But I mean, we all know this. It's labeling and thing. You can't assume anyone knows what you know when you've been working with it all day. You know, it's always, people always like, that look like, oh, it's so obvious it's there. It's like, well, you've been on this stage for 3 weeks rigging. Of course you know exactly where everything is. This unit just showed up. They don't know where anything is, and they're getting yelled at in their ear. So it's just so important to create a simple, coherent system for first unit. You know, that is the #1 goal for me rigging-wise and with the network. But so this is my little thing. This is my favorite thing I've probably ever made. I make color-coded universes that correlate to first unit's universes. I have Velcro on the back, Velcro on the front. So you plug in the PDB, you take whatever universes you address it to at the node, boom, throw the Velcro on. And that allows the first unit to label their universes extremely quickly, and I'm told it has helped with getting the light in the right universe. So I love a good color label in Velcro. I'm a sucker for it, man. I'd put on everything if I could. You know, it's very dark, and yeah.
Do you find that having it just be an opto, or, I mean, this could be a segue to you like you were talking about going to node lunch boxes.
Yeah.
Do you find that this is simpler for people on set versus having the node lunch box and changing the port to each universe that you need for that one?
So, you know, I'm limited by my cost, right? So I'd love to have a PDB at every distro with every universe in it, you know? But I typically only have like 1 or 2 at a distro, and they've got, as you can see here, 12 universes they might need, and then we have the blank. So Well, look,
One thing, instead of the PDB versus the node, one,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So the issue is that they're still having to address the node. You know what I mean? So they're still having to go. You know, I put the box there, and I might pick universe 1 and 2, but then they go, oh no, we need universes 4 and 5. So they got to go to the node. They got to make sure they have the right DMX cable, and then they still have to change it. You know, so they're still addressing the node, but now instead of if the node was in the lunch pail, I'm next to the light and I'm next to the node. I can see what it needs to be. But now I'm radioing to somebody because the node's 50 feet away. And so that disconnect, I think, causes a lot of issues. And I think by putting the node right next to the light, it's more blatantly obvious if something's not working. All right, I plug my light in, no, it doesn't work. Okay, the light's universe 5. Oh, I look down, oh, that's universe 6. I'll fix that real quick. So I think getting those endpoints together closer will work much better. Now, maybe I'm totally wrong, but it feels like that's a better system to me.
And you think that it'll be as stream, like, this is very foolproof, right? For a new player to come in. Like, they have two options, one of two universes. Whereas the node, it can be whatever you set that forward to. You think that it's still as...
Well, because, I mean, this is still going back to a node. You know what I mean? That's the thing. If it was like, if this thing was always universe 9 and 10, I'd say, oh, of course, this is easier. But this box is still being changed. You know what I mean? And the problem is, it's not being changed at the box. It's being changed remotely. So if I have someone else addressing the node, and they're not doing it properly, then this box isn't working. Now, it says universe 9, but it's really universe 12. Now my light's totally misbehaving, and it's not doing it right. And I have to go back, troubleshoot, make sure this cable, oh, it's the orange one, not this one. You know? That makes sense? Yeah, if I only had 2 universes of DMX, oh yeah, this would be the simplest way possible. But because I'm still using a node, I don't see it as being simpler. Network sets, why bother, right? We talked about this earlier. You can move your board around. I think I'm running out of time. I better speed up this end here. Close proximity to the set. So you can. I mean, that's huge, right? You can see the light you're actually controlling. I mean, being in a dark room and trying to see, is that right? Is that the right color? Essentially infinite number of universes, obviously not complete infinity, but you know, it allows it to be the network, the data to be available all over set. You can have multiple consoles, you can have backup consoles. You know, I don't know if you ever worked on like a live show, they've always got 2 consoles going, so if one dies, boom, the other one takes over immediately. That's a real nice safety net. And the economies of scale. Networking devices, even though lighting switches are more expensive, the remaining of networking gear is far cheaper than DMX. Oop. So this is a little video of an old rig with a lot of DMX. And it still has a node, but it only has like 1 node. And I mean, you can see all of that DMX. And actually in this photo, all this cable up here is actually not part of the lighting network. That's fiber that goes for video feeds. So the entire lighting network is just those 2 little cables up there. So, you know, it's substantially different. Much less rigging time, much less work. You're getting way more bang for your buck. You know, some setups. That was kind of my, that's a version of my old switch and node. You know, each, on the super duper baits, that was the number 1 cable, the number 2 cable. So that's how people could identify it. You know, more color coding. You know, some people like to do we call these dog houses. You know, they build big setups, a lot of stuff, but you know, once again, they do have a node on this one, but yeah. All right, networking saves time. More can be done with less. Tablets. Turn sets. Oh yeah, that's another great one. Turning on sets remotely. You know, when you're in the middle of a lighting setup and the DP goes, "Hey, I want to go check out that new set," the programmer can bring up the queue, and he doesn't have to go plug in the other stage or go run over there or do anything. I mean, that's huge, at least for us. You know, there's a lot of pre-lighting that goes on, and the fact that he can talk to those other stages and not have to move is super beneficial. And we can also divide and conquer when we're rigging. I can have multiple rigging programmers working on different parts of the rig. This guy can be pixel mapping lights in a thing. Another one can be patching. Another one can be building layout views. And all that work is seamlessly integrated in the show file. No longer does one person have to do it all or log into different ones. I can have all these people building towards the same goal. And that's super helpful as well.
Are you able to divide it so that the rigging crew on this stage can't affect the lights that they're actually actually filming what's over here?
There is a way to do it, and it's different for different consoles. MA has a thing called Worlds. We just don't use it. I leave some decisions up to my main programmer, and he doesn't want to use it, and so then we don't do it. And like I said, the few times I have blacked out the set, and it's always me, they actually have not been filming, so I've always been really lucky. But currently, no, we do not. But there are ways to do it, yes. Tremendous flexibility. Flexibility. Went over this loops. No two devices can have the same IP address. Really keeping on top of your IP subnet scheme. We make the third octet our stage number, and then we keep all the devices like the same. Consoles have this, things have that, and whatever works for you, however you want to lay it out. But it's important to just keep track of it. We have a Google Sheets. We all go on, and we make sure that we don't repeat IP addresses, and we're all on the same page.
Do you use static or do you use
Yeah, we do all static.
other than for the wireless?
Yes, that's the only ones. Yeah, I prefer static. But once again, some people, I know guys that they got a location rig or something, they will use DHCP. So to each your own, number one mistake I see is cheap off-the-shelf gear. A lot of people will try to get into networking sometimes, and cheap switches can fall asleep. They can block lighting traffic. They can just have a lot of problems. And another thing to consider is, most networking gear is designed to be left on. You think about your router at home. I mean, when do you ever turn that off? Just when you want to reset it. So if you've got all your switches and stuff in the stage power and you're cycling power on and off every day, you can damage cheap stuff. So that's an important consideration. I try to keep most of my network on 24-hour power. And it's not always doable, but when you can, it's good to do it. And you gotta be careful. There are Ethernet cables that are only copper clad. They're much cheaper. I haven't run into them, but I've heard about it. And just you got to test those Ethernet cables. I've even had bad ones from the factory. Always, you can Ethernet tester for, I think they're $12. There's no excuse not to have one. They're just save you a lot of headache trying to figure out where that break is. All right, and then a lot of times people jump to the managed network too soon. I highly recommend, if you're new to this networking thing, try the unmanaged version. Work your way up to it. Don't just dive right in if you're uncomfortable with it. Now, if you have a gaffer or a crew that's ready to do it as a team and they want to go for it, then go for it. But I try to always run what I'm doing by my gaffer, and I'm very lucky that he likes to push the envelope. But I always like him to know, hey, I'm going to try this. It may cause this to happen, and he says, do it. If the benefits outweigh the bad things. And so, just being honest with each other. You don't have to hide things. Just hey, we're going to try this thing with our network. But most shows really can just use an unmanaged network. And that's why I always tell people, start there. Start with that. And you might discover things that you didn't realize, or you'll learn lessons. I guarantee you. And yeah. And then that's the thing. Don't be fooled by those nomenclatures you see online. A lot of switches labeled smart or semi-managed are really the worst of both worlds, not the best. So the switch is the lifeblood of the switch and the cable are the lifeblood of your network. So I would not cheap out on those two devices. I wouldn't use a cheap piece of 4-aught, and I wouldn't use a cheap distro box. Get somebody killed. At least in a network, nobody dies, but you don't get your packets. Access, that's another problem. You have those switches on the ground. Sometimes you'll get a savvy person with their laptop trying to plug in. You can buy sort of these, they make these little RJ45 caps that I use a lot, and I plug them into my switches so you can't, they're like longer than a normal RJ45, but you can't crimp them, they're just shells. And that way people can't plug into them. That show I took over, they had rigged the switches to right at eye level. And so it's super inviting to people to be like, oh, here's internet. So it's not internet. Set lighting is not on internet. That's another thing. I don't know if we've gotten to that yet, but you probably don't want your lighting network on the internet. It's a good rule of thumb. You're opening a whole host of issues if you're on the internet. Smaller and contained is better. Yeah, it is. Especially those IP ranges like we talked about. Now, we've done things with VPNs, and there's some cool stuff out there. There's a company called the Network Bridge, and they're pre-configured VPNs, and I had my programmer at his house, and he was bringing up lights for us. And so there is some cool stuff you can do, but that's that layer 4, layer 5 stuff, so you might want to jump into that just yet if you're starting on networking. All right. despite pitfalls, right? Look at all this. We got the digital age. Set lighting can lead the way and shape the future of the production landscape. Everyone's talking about digital productions and what we can and can't do. It's important, I think, for us to move on with the technology. The rest of production is, and if we, as set lighting technicians, cling to the old ways, we're going to get left in the dust. Because productions want things to be more efficient, faster, and better. And so, we need to absorb this technology. This is what people demand now. With the DITE and the LUT pre-configured, the DP sits there and adjusts those lights, on 16-bit mode, up and down, 1 or 2%. People want to see the finished product almost while they're shooting. The associative producer, the gaffer, the DP, the actors, they want that control, and they want to be able to do it right now. And so, by facilitating that, we just ensure our job security. This is what sets demand these days. And so by doing that, and I like when the set lighting department seems like the sharpest department on the set. That's always my goal, I like when my guys know what they're doing, and then I like to wow people. And they go, wow, I can't believe you guys can do all this. This is amazing. And that's a really nice feeling when people are impressed by the lights. As opposed to, oh, what happened? The lights don't work again. Oh, we're behind because of lighting. Some cool stuff we've did. There's some video walls. Lights on helicopters, cool stuff you can all do with networking. Lots of fun, wireless bridges. This is just, channels are only going to get bigger. There's only going to be more and more. I mean, that's it, they're not getting smaller. Every new lighting profile I see has more and more channels. Interactive light is a huge thing. We work in these digital environments with blue screen and green screen. We are, aside from lighting the actors, oftentimes we're mimicking some sort of real world phenomenon, whether it be a fire, an explosion, and all these things. And they're asking us to do this because that's the only way to sell these digital environments with interactive light. And I have directors talking about interactive light now, and these people that I ever heard lighting come out of their mouth, it's becoming more and more important to these people, and and that's good for us. But by having the network, by having the infrastructure, we can handle all these requests. We can run video files to our lights. We can make it do all this stuff. And I don't know if you ever tried to program a fire effect on a bunch of sky panels. It's far easier to send in some fire data and let the lights do it themselves. And so it really is simpler once it's all up and running. That's the best part about it. And things are advancing. I can't wait for the day where the bridges are good enough and the console doesn't even need to be plugged into the network. You have a wireless bridge, he can be on battery, and he can just move wherever he wants. Obviously that's a little bit off still, but here's some cool videos. I'm going to take those videos. They got one about IGMP snooping and universe count. They're fun to watch. They're a little old, but they make the good point. I think we're running out of time, but I'm sure if you guys got some questions or things you'd like to ask, or I can go back on stuff.
Do you use any sort of real-time lighting effects with the LED walls in Mandalorian?
Yes.
Okay, so where they would position your key and stuff is changing directly with your lights at the same exact time?
Unfortunately, because we're live streaming, I can't show you. I'm not, I can't show you guys. But yes, and that's exactly it. We're able to take the video feed from the digital environment, and we're able to either integrate the color data to match that and to augment it, or sometimes even like GPS data as to like where a light or a source might be if they're moving, and we're able to integrate that into our lights. And and that's the cool part. Once it's all integrated, it's so much easier to have those systems just talk to each other and do it than to try to sit there with encoder wheels and try to match it or follow it. I mean, that'd be maddening, especially if you're talking about multiple takes over the course of a day. Yeah.
Along with that environmental question, I guess. So with that and like wanting to like map the time of day or whatever to your lights from the immediacy. Was that something they just came to you with as RG, or was this a committee decision, or was there a media server programmer, a lighting programmer, a gaffer? Was it a committee, or just they just came to you to deal with it?
It was my programmers and me and the gaffer. So we're constantly, there's all these new jobs on set, and there's all these new things happening. So I always try my best when something could be lighting, I try to make it lighting. Because I want to carve out those jobs for us, and I want us to do more, and I want us to be integral, I want to, when they talk about an idea, to go, we better get lighting in on this, and so, I try my best, if anything is lighting related, I try my best to absorb that, and it has bitten me. I offered to run the network for a huge network for visual effects on our stage, and because it was running cables, and they didn't really know how to run cables well, and we got it, but it was a lot of fiber, and it took a lot of time, and they come in 500-foot cables, and they're very fragile, and riggers aren't always the most fragile, glass cable, and so we had some problems, but yeah, we try our best to do those jobs, ensure the security of lighting moving forward, I guess I'd say.
And without giving away or talking to tech a little bit, but like for those effects to work, like is that just over the streaming ACN network, the remapping of the media server to the lights?
Exactly, and they have to do stuff on their end to make the protocols talk to each other. But these things exist, and to be honest with you, most of it's from like live show stuff, and from my understanding, because they do so much dynamic lighting like that. Where follow spots will follow Pink as she travels through the air and does all this crazy stuff. And so that's where I think a lot of these technologies coming from. They seem to be the ones pushing a lot of these cool ideas. But once again, I'm not 100%. Yeah.
Are you worried with if you run the network, like if you open up your own network, you've got a managed network, and you're like, okay, now VLAN 6 is for video. For the liability side of things, now video's having trouble and they're pointing their finger at you.
That is a fear. I had a friend call me recently about that. In the same way that if I run power to the DIT guy and his thing blows up, I'm liable. There is some fear there, but there's no reward without some risk. And I've done it before, and the switches do the work. They do it all, and so you test it, you try to be smart. Maybe if it's your first time, you let people know, hey, we're just going to try this, and then if it works flawlessly, you can go next time it happens. You go, hey, I've done that before. It works. And there's always going to be a little risk, right? No matter what you do.
Is there anything from that you want to kind of demand from the light manufacturers right now?
I just want more. I want more data distribution devices, and because everyone's building lights. Everybody's got a new light every other week. Honestly, what I'd like a micro profile. So you've got the pixel map 200 channel profile. I'd like the simplest however you can give me full color control in the smallest profile possible, so when I'm at a location and I'm doing a small commercial and I'm doing all this, I don't necessarily have to have 20 universes active. I could get a lot more lights into one universe. I just did a movie with the DP, and he ran a whole movie on Luminaire, and I would just where the Gaffer did, and it looked tough. I did not envy him. But that's the funny part, right? You go from a show like this with 200 universes, the next show I'm on, I got arc lights, and the show after that, it's all ran off an iPad. So you never know what you're going to get, right? Yes, sir. Yeah.
So with the Mandalorian and the multiple stages together on the same file, is it did you channel up all the stages together in that one show file? Okay, this stage is 1,000 to 3,000, or is it like that? I'm calling up fixture 18,000, but I'm over here, or am I logging off and logging on to something and calling it up?
No, it's all once. There's no logging in and out. And we try to keep the fixture numbers in the thousands. We try not to go to the 10,000. The programmer doesn't like that extra button.
Yeah.
He gets upset with me if we go into that. So typically we try to do some sort of, we do reuse fixture numbers. We have no standing sets, so everything kind of gets recycled. We have run into problems when a set comes back, and all of a sudden the fixture numbers for recalling the queue are now in a different set, and that gets a little frustrating. But you can't win them all, so there's always going to be issues. But that is typically how we do it. We kind of reserve certain blocks of universes for each stage, and we more separate things by universe than anything. Yeah.
And do you have a quick example of saying again with multiple stages? So you talked about you use the networking infrastructure that your studio already had.
Yeah.
In this project. But for instance, the studios here, the main one. It's an old steel.
No.
There's no infrastructure. So running stage to stage, far, did you have to do fiber things, or would you just do a category-based intercon network? Just multiple stages?
It all depends how far away they are. Fiber's a great choice. Fibers, you can do a lot of fiber, go really long. We've done huge fiber rigs in downtown. But yeah, so it's all case by case basis. So you just have to kind of look at it and see what's best for you. But cool. I want to thank everybody. It's a lot of fun. First time talking in front of people and since COVID hit. So yeah, cool. Thank you very much.